Hello, my name is Amanda. That is how each call started. I once worked for a recruitment agency that gathered skilled individuals for companies outsourcing their hiring to other firms. The agency's notice for any job opening was often met with thousands of applications for a single position. The bar for qualification was high. It went without saying that the ensuing procedure to ensure that qualification was rigorous. Potential candidates had to go through 3 tests before they could begin a series of face-to-face interviews. That was where I entered the picture. Like my superior would say back then, I was the beginning of the second wave of the agency's procedure for weeding out persons that didn't meet the standards the agency set. This essentially meant that I had the privilege of speaking with several people a day, 10 minutes each. At the end of the session, I had to make flash decisions if those applicants needed to be left on the cutting floor or were good enough to move on to the second interview and hence move on further up the recruitment process. The agency's guide for making this call was based on a combination of things. Number 1 was the applicant's answers to the questions that were given. 2 was their composure while answering those questions. The first one was easy compared to the second, as any nuance of body language was often lost in the grainy transmission that was Zoom calls. I know what you're thinking. I probably quit because the pay was shit. No, the pay wasn't the best, but it was enough for a 25-year-old like me who'd been out of a job for 2 years after college and wanted nothing more than to work from home. As I said, I spent an average of 10 minutes on each call. The calls, once I got used to them, never deviated from the pattern. I asked questions, I listened, I smiled, and ended the call. I opened the spreadsheet, and then typed out a remark under the person's name, then send it, and repeat. I remember the day now just like it was yesterday. I was at home in the corner I'd set up to answer the office calls. I went through the spreadsheet. The next name was Alex. I imputed the number and dialed it. It rang for a while before the person on the other side answered the call. Hello, my name's Amanda. I'll be your interview officer today, I said with a smile. Everything was done with a smile at the agency. Hi, my name's Alex, the man on the other side said. The way he spoke made the words sound a lot more sinister than they were. Hello? Can you hear me? He asked, snapping me out of my thoughts of the black bag object rolled up in the corner. Yes, I can, I replied. Okay, he said. It's nice to finally see you face to face, he replied. I didn't allow myself to think anything of the phrasing, as he was probably just nervous himself, too. I moved past that, asking him about his resume and the gap between his last 2 jobs. Do you know I hate cats? He asked. I was speechless, as I didn't understand the meaning of the non sequitur. Is it just me? Has your face become more beautiful than the last time I saw it? Alex! I shouted. That is highly unprofessional, and I must ask that your answers and comments remain within the confines of the question I ask you. He held up both hands as if to say he was done. At least that's what I interpreted as. I repeated my question. He answered. I asked a few more questions, and he answered. Although I'd already lost my patience, the agency required me to ask one last one. This was meant to showcase the creativity of the applicant, or whatever bullshit reason the agency gave for listing that question. Is there anything else you want on the record? No. He nodded his head. Okay, that's the end of the interview. The agency will be in touch with you, I told him. Just right at the moment I was about to click on the end button, the man shouted for me to wait. What is it? I said. I couldn't hide the annoyance in my voice anymore. I miss you, he said. What? I miss you, he repeated. It's been a long while since I saw your face, he said. That was it, I thought to myself. You know what? Fuck you, I said as I ended the call. I moved to the spreadsheet and marked the name Alex with an X. I was about to restart the interview process. I'd spent more than 10 minutes on the call with the creep and needed to get back on track. I looked through the names on the spreadsheet, picked the next name, and called. Before the call could connect again, my phone began ringing. It was a video call from a number that wasn't saved on my phone. I rejected it, but the number called back as quickly as I rejected, and as frequently, too. Finally giving in, I answered the call, only to see the now familiar face of Alex staring at me from the phone. "How did you get my number? If you continue this, I'll have no option but to disqualify you, and you won't be able to go forward with the job opening." "Oh, fuck the job opening," he said with a smile. Not to lose a step, I followed up by threatening to report him to the police. This didn't deter him. He just moved forward to the screen, licked his lips in front of the camera. I was about to end the call again when he asked a question that sent a shiver down my spine. "How's Buttercup doing?" he asked. I sat there without moving, the thoughts and memory crisscrossing my mind with the speed of a moving train. Buttercup was my cat, you see. She was a gift from my mother before she passed away. I loved that cat more than anything. I went looking for Buttercup after she didn't turn up 2 nights in a row. I didn't find her. One day, I'd gotten a knock on the door and opened the door to find my sweet cat on the ground. She had been shaved, and from the looks of it, she was tortured too. At that moment, my mind flashed back to what he said about hating cats. "How do you know about Buttercup?" I asked, sure that he had a hand in the death of my cat. "Did you kill my cat?" I asked again. He laughed again. This time he didn't just stop. He told me that my pants looked nice. The camera on my PC was only capturing my blouse. There was no way he could see below the table. I ended the call, closed my blinds, put off the light, and called the police. After a day or two, they came back with the news that on visiting the house, they found the owner of the house was dead, and had been dead for days. Whoever this Alex was, he must have done it. I quit immediately after that, changed my name, and moved out of state. It had been 3 years now without the specter in my life. I opened the door today after the doorbell had rung, and there was no one there. Just a note on the ground that said, "I miss you. From Alex."
She arrived a few minutes earlier than anticipated, with 2 crates of beer in hand. I smiled, welcoming her in with a hug before taking her coat and hanging it on the rack. I led her to the living room. I hastily pulled some of my shoes I tossed around, trying to make the place less of a mess than it was. When my gaze rose to meet hers, she had a hint of a sheepish smile on her. "Sorry, you're a bit early," I murmured. She smiled broadly now. It had to be the most beautiful thing ever. "I don't mind, really. My room is a bit worse than this." She pushed some of the clothes from the couch, taking a sit, then tossed them some more, patting the seat beside her. I beamed, unable to hide my intrigue. I sat beside her, handing her a bottle as I took the other. I could not believe how well we matched. I'd met Sassy on a dating site a couple of days back, and our conversation had started with our unusual love for crime documentaries, and before either of us knew what was happening, we were deep into conversations about the mind of serial killers. Everything just seemed to click. It was like she was inside my head, telling me everything I knew. For the first time, someone actually saw things from my perspective, and it was definitely the same for her, because when I asked her to come over to my place and we would watch some documentaries on Netflix, she hadn't hesitated to say yes. She was here, and now. "So let's get started," I said, logging into my Netflix account and clicking randomly on one of the documentaries. I had no interest in the documentary, just her. Somehow, I was already falling for this girl. I guess I should have known life never really favored me with such luck. We sat in silence, watching with rapt attention as the documentary began. The only sound was that of our mouth crunching popcorn and the voice of the narrator as he explained about a serial killer who killed only because he loved the look of terror on the faces of his victims before shooting them. One of the victims had survived after a missed shot, and when she'd returned only to find her attacker still there, she asked him if he wanted to kill her again. Sassy scoffed at this, and I cast a glance at her without another word, then back to the screen. "I think Ted Bundy is still my favorite," I said when the documentary ended. She had an intrigued look on her face. "Why?" she asked, her eyes fixed on me like I was her favorite subject. "Honestly, I don't really know. There's just... Oh, come on. Just because he's famous doesn't mean he's the best. There are a lot of serial killers out there today I would never pick over Ted Bundy." "Well, he's handsome too," I added. "You're handsome," she said. My face turned pink at the compliment. Thank you," I said, clearing my throat. "Another?" I asked. "Oh no," she said. "As much as true crimes and their theories about serial killers intrigue me, you intrigue me more. Another compliment." I had to clear my voice this time before I found it again. "So..." She leaned closer, her eyes twinkling. I reached for her, wiping off the hair that dangled between her eyes. She blushed. That was when she asked the question that changed the whole dynamic of our date. 4 words, so powerful, they changed my life forever. "So, what's your body count?" she asked. I opened my mouth, stuttering. I racked my brain trying to figure out a way to not say I was a virgin and have her walk out of the door. 5, I blurted out. 5? She asked, her smile bright now. I nodded, gulping a huge load of my beer. 5. That's it, with a slow nod. She studied me, that same unreadable smile on her face. "You're not a serial killer yet, then," she said, the same smile on her face. I blinked. The obvious surprise on my face must have given me away because her eyes shone with the same surprise, no doubt mirroring mine. "Shoot, I was joking. You have to see your face right now," she said with a strained laugh. I forced out a laugh too, my brain reeling it all in. She wasn't joking. She definitely wasn't joking. My heart pounded in my chest. I turned my gaze to my laptop, sweat forming over my forehead. Everything around me seemed to have swollen twice their usual size. My heart pounded so hard in my chest, despite all my actions to conceal the terror racing through my body now. I could feel her gaze on me, watching my every move. I need to get something from... I felt the heavy squash of the bottle colliding with my head before the pain reeled in. I jolted to motion. But she had already anticipated the move. She caught me by my leg, pulling me to the ground, face flat. God, was she strong. 1 minute I was fighting to free my leg, the next she was on me, her fingers digging into my neck. I pushed my hands, trying to free myself, but nothing. God, this is how I'm going to die? God, I can't die. I can't die. My heart was thrashing to get away from my chest now. I pushed with all my weight. For someone so small, she felt heavy, or perhaps the way she held my hands. I could not use all my strength. Something sharp stung my finger, and almost instantly I reached for it, grabbing the bottle. Never mind it tearing through my fingers. I pushed the bottle into her. She squeaked in pain. It was all the seconds I needed. I pushed to my feet, darting to the door again, but she was on me, fast and furious, fighting more like a wrestler than an average girl. Christ. There was no escaping her. I knew it. There was no reaching the door that was so close but felt so far away. There was only one way out. I turned to her. No more running. I threw a wide punch, trying to catch anything. She caught my hand, and with a snap, I felt the bone on my shoulder shift, contested only by the scream that followed, like a hallowing cry. I threw the other hand. It collided with her jaw for the first time. She grunted again. I turned. Instead of running, I climbed onto her, fist reaching for her face. Her fingers grabbed me, her hands digging into my eyes, fingers pressing my balls, wreaking pain through every part of me. My eyes felt like they were about to explode, and I grabbed her hand. That same incredible strength came to her rescue, but I continued my fist wrapped around her neck, squeezing tight. I could feel my muscles weaken the same as hers, our breaths heavy. No, there was no winning this. I reached around me, feeling for any of the shards from the broken bottle. She must have realized because almost instantly, her hands attacked my eyes. My eyelids felt like a thread was sewing them together. Still, but I knew this was the one thing standing between me and death. Willing myself to rise, and thanks to my knowledge of my house, I raced towards the window, diving through it, eyes closed. True to my aim, Glass tore through my skin as I stumbled outside, landing on the lawn. I took to my heels, running blindly, screaming, "Help! Help!" Soon, murmurs surrounded me. I rushed towards the murmurs, still attempting to open my eyes. Nothing still. Behind them, the darkness remained with the lingering pain. A hand guided me, followed by the blaring of sirens. My heart pounded in my chest. I was safe. The police were already close. "Are you okay?" The familiar voice of my neighbor cooed. There's a serial killer in my house," I stammered, a shiver racing through my body. Seeing my condition, Rick, my neighbor, acted swiftly. He took me indoors while we waited for the police. I reported everything to the cops. I immediately took out my phone and opened the dating app, but to my horror, Sassy's profile was no longer there. The cops rushed to my apartment, but there was no trace of her. It had been 2 weeks now, and they are yet to get back to me. While I'm in recovery mode, I still suffer from constant anxiety and nightmares. I don't think I will be comfortable with online dating ever again. It was a Saturday. The day had been like every other Saturday, except that I was shaken by the end of the day. My name is Sarah Jameson, and this is the story I never wanted to tell. Before I begin, do like and subscribe. The day started with me waking up in my small, tightly packed bed. The bed was so small, it felt like an uncomfortable hug sometimes. I stayed in bed for a while until I couldn't endure the tight fit anymore. With a little push, I moved my body to a sitting position to face the walls that closed off my room from the others. The first thing I did after getting into the sitting position was reach for my phone by the side of the bed. On picking it up, I saw a notification for 7 missed calls. Lucy, I thought before I tapped the button that revealed who the caller was. I wasn't wrong, not that I had any doubts that I was. I stopped myself from pressing the dial button, tossed the phone back on the bed, and contented myself to look at the walls of my small room. I didn't have the strength to talk to her. I worked at a marketing company downtown, and anyone who worked my position in the past would tell you that the job was no walk in the park. The previous day at work was a nightmare. It had seen me return home by 10 p.m. Working there was itself a nightmare. I would have liked nothing more than changing location, but finding a job in this city was a nightmare. I went back to sleep after that. I had woken up to even more missed calls from Lucy. I picked up the phone and called Lucy. The voice that came from the other side was as energetic as it always was. This was how Lucy was, an endless pool of energy, but she was my endless pool of energy. "Hello," I said, hoping that she had used up most of her excess energy with what I would describe to be the introduction to the call. She replied to my hello with a reply that wasn't as loud as her initial hello, but was still loud and very much on brand. "You called me earlier in the day. I'm sorry I didn't answer. I was out cold. Didn't even hear my phone ring." "You should quit that job of yours," Lucy said. "That's easier said than done. There are hardly any jobs. That's why you need someone to take care of you, is what I think. You know what?" Of course I knew what. Lucy had been going on about this new club that had opened somewhere in mid-city. It was all the rage, at least. That is what Lucy would have me believe. "What?" I asked, just to be certain that we weren't talking about different things. "You know the club I've been trying to get you to attend? You're coming with me," Lucy said with an air of finality. I was about to complain when she cut me off. "I mean, it's a Saturday. You don't have to worry about work or anything. You could go, get back, and sleep everything off before Monday. The others are coming too. You don't want to disappoint your friends, do you? Who knows, maybe you could even get lucky. Find someone to fuck the senses out of you." "I don't know," I said, a last attempt to try to get out. "I do know, and you better believe you are coming," Lucy said. Luckily, Rebecca and Daisy both showed up on time, just as Lucy said they would. We moved over to the club that had a strange name that made me feel weird. The Gold Digger. That wasn't the only strange thing. The people in line were dressed in clothes and makeup that made them seem otherworldly. Lucy and Daisy laughed before Lucy replied it was normal in clubs everywhere. While I wasn't convinced, I stood in line because Lucy was more experienced in the city's nightlife. We all stood in line until we were at the front of the line. "Wow, wait, where do you think you're going?" the bouncer with no neck said. I was 25 years old, but for some reason my face and my body had not grown up any more past 18. I explained to him and showed him my ID before we could enter. "This is what we are talking about," Lucy said as we got into the club. I wasn't sure if those were her exact words because of the blaring music, but I knew she had said something to that effect. Rebecca and Daisy went off to dance, leaving me with Lucy, who dragged me to the bar to put something in our stomach. That was when I remembered Cecil. She and Lucy used to be good friends, until they weren't. "Lucy," I shouted at her. "Whatever happened to Cecil?" Lucy looked back at me with a look that suggested she didn't know who I was talking about. "Come on, you know Cecil. Two of you were always going out, clubbing and whatnot." "Oh, Cecil, I don't know what to say. We just stopped being friends." We were drinking when Lucy poked me. "You see that man? He's been watching you ever since we entered," she said. "I'm not interested," I replied. "Come on. Do you know who that is? That's Alex Perez, one of the richest men in the city. Think about what you stand to gain if you play your cards right." I shrugged off her suggestion, as I wasn't a prostitute. I moved towards the bathroom. When I was walking, I wasn't sure, but I saw a man staring at me with an intense look in his eyes. I had tried doing a double take, but the person had blended into the crowd. It was when I sat down, I heard footsteps hovering over the stall I was in that caused the pee to cease. "Is anyone there?" My voice echoed through the empty bathroom. I stared through the gap in the door, but couldn't see anyone. I couldn't continue peeing. I was too freaked out for that, so I ran out of the bathroom and called Lucy. "Where's Rebecca and Daisy? We need to leave now." "Why? The party just got started." "Someone was following me." The look on Lucy's face changed as I explained that a strange man was following me, but the look disappeared when I couldn't tell who the person was. Lucy laughed as I shook my head, not realizing that I was even that drunk to begin with. "I still think we need to leave," I said to her, but she had doubled down on hooking us up with Alex Perez and his friend. I disagreed, but Lucy tugged until she convinced me to stay. We drank several shots. It was on the sixth one. I felt a hand grab me from the back. I looked back, and it was nothing. There was no one there. "All right," I thought to myself. I am that drunk. "Will you give it a chance then?" Lucy asked. "Give what a chance?" I asked. Lucy stood and pointed to Alex Perez, and even thinking about it for a second, I decided that it couldn't do much harm. It had been a while since I had flirted, but it worked, and Alex invited all of us back to the mansion. We all got into his limousine and began the trip. Lucy, Daisy, and Rebecca were still going on about my game when I noticed something. "Lucy! Lucy!" I shouted. "What, girl? Why are you stressing? We're about to party with Alex Perez." "Isn't that his building we just passed, though?" I asked. Lucy agreed and walked forward and knocked on the glass of the limousine, but there was no reply. I stepped forward and rapped my knuckle on the black glass. "Come on, girl, don't break the glass. I'm sure there's an explanation for all this." Just then, all the doors locked with a click. I ran back and tried to open the doors. I could hear my heartbeat in my head. It got worse when the black glass rolled down for something to be thrown in. The last thing I could remember before everything went dark was the four of us trying to get the cylindrical object out of the window before it squealed and I fell to the floor. I just laid there with my eyes open, looking at what looked like clouds up above. I couldn't feel my hands or my legs. For some reason I couldn't explain, I was strangely calm about the entire ordeal, while my brain was screaming to my entire body to wake the fuck up from where I was lying and stand to my feet. I didn't really feel the urge to be nervous. I stayed this way, immobilized for quite a long time before I began to hear mutters coming from all directions apart from the one I was looking in. The noise around me had started as just as that, mutters, like the stereotypical noise from a cartoon mouse. For a split second, I had the sensation that I was in a den of mice, but that feeling soon passed, and it was replaced by the calm serenity that had been there before. The noise didn't stay that way for long. I began to hear the voices for just what they were. "Rebecca, is that you?" At least that was what I would have asked before discovering the words were not coming out of my lips. I couldn't freak out. I couldn't talk. Neither could I move. It was almost like I was under anesthesia or some other sort of paralysis-inducing drug. Yes, I thought to myself as pieces of the night before began to come back. I remembered struggling to escape the limo before the gaseous cylinder was thrown into the room and before it knocked me out. Just then, as the memory entered my mind, a face entered my plane of view. It crept up on me. Even then, my brain hadn't realized it was a face until the third blink. When my brain finally did, I realized the face had blonde hair and a small nose. It was Rebecca. "Rebecca, is that you?" I asked, not expecting the words to come out, but they had. "Yes, it is," she replied, pulling me up from the ground where I was. I was hit by a wave of vertigo as my legs touched the floor. I could barely stand as my legs felt as if they were atrophied from lack of use. "How many days have we been out?" I asked. The only answer I got was the look of fear and confusion on Rebecca's and Daisy's faces. I came to 3 realizations after looking around. The first thing I noticed was we were in an enclosed space of some kind. The second was that there was a massive screen in the wall in front of us. Third, some cameras were placed in strategic corners of the room. Somebody was watching us. Someone was watching, I kept on thinking to myself. Did I say I noticed 3 things? There was a fourth that caused my anxiety and fear to shoot up higher than it had been waking up in a strange white room filled with cameras. "Where's Lucy?" I asked. "I don't know," both Daisy and Rebecca said. According to them, we had been the only occupants of the room when they came. It wasn't long after that I felt the thing, whatever it was that was holding back my complete fear from erupting like a geyser, begin to strain. I could feel the cracks already. I was beginning to struggle for the air I was breathing, and it was just me. There was still air in the room. I was still struggling for air when the room was filled with noise. The large screen on the wall came on to reveal a masked person. The image on the screen caused the 3 of us to huddle against the opposing wall as though it had some sort of protective power from the person on the screen. There was quiet among the 2 groups of people. However, the room had gotten even quieter. So quiet that it was hard for me to hear anyone's breath. "It is good to see that everyone is up." "Welcome to— Where are we, you monster?" Rebecca shouted, breaking the silence and interrupting the masked figure. The figure laughed and told Rebecca that if she had let them continue, we would have all found out where we were. "This is the gold digger," the masked figure said. "The gold digger," I repeated to myself. The question of if we were back at the club was almost out of my lips when the figure began speaking again. "This is not the club. That is more of a prequel of sorts. This is the main story. Before you interrupt, I shall tell you why you are here." The masked figure explained that we were in that room to take part in an event. During the event, they explained, we were going to be given several tasks to do, and when we were done, we were going to be set free. We refused, but we were not given the chance to voice out our protest as the screen went dead immediately. It was hard to tell the time as there was no clock anywhere in sight. It felt like days, and my throat thirsted for water and my stomach longed for food. We called for help several times, but there was none. We were so thirsty, hungry, and tired that we couldn't get up, not even when the static repeated itself and the screen came on. "It's been 3 days now," the voice from the screen in the walls said. "Would you like to try that again? Are you willing to go through the events now?" the voice asked. We gave a weak yes. Immediately, when we said the word yes, the lights all around the room went dark. The next thing I felt was my body being lifted from the floor. I could barely see as my body was carried through what felt like a narrow corridor into another room, where I began to feel water run over my body. This was followed by rough scrubbing from various angles, with different hands tugging me in them. When the water stopped, everything went dark. I opened my eyes again and saw that we were in a new room, although this one had more cameras than the previous room. We were wearing something that could be best described as a cross between a child ballerina mixed with a latex jacket, like something that could be found in a red room or something. and a tight collar around our neck. The instruction for the first task came soon after from the masked figure on the screen. There was something familiar about the voice. It sounded like... No, it couldn't be, I thought to myself. The instruction was to walk on all fours to the men at the end of the room. We were meant to pick out the treat in the buckets with nothing but our mouth and teeth until the buckets on the other side were full. I was going to protest, but I was too tired and too hungry. I bent down and did as I was asked, feeling nothing but hate for Alex Perez and whoever was behind that mask. It took a while, but we finished transferring the treats from one end of the room to the other. We weren't a second done when we were ushered into another room. This room was filled with food that looked like much care was used to prepare it. I could feel my mouth begin to water. The thought of eating was not fully processed when Daisy rushed to grab the food. She didn't make it. She was held back by the leash that was attached to the collar on her neck. We were instructed to take off the latex jackets and to roll over the food, smothering ourselves with it. And it was only then that we were allowed to eat. I was so hungry that even though I didn't want to do it, I did. I did until there was nowhere for the food to go. We were then dragged to the next room with 3 transparent toilets and laxatives on a stool. I don't like recalling this memory, but we had been forced to take laxatives and wait for it to work. We did. I was put to sleep, and not long after, I woke up in my small, tightly packed bed. I had been gone for a week. I had led the rest to report Alex Perez and our treatment over the weekend. We had been told that there was nothing they could do, and were told to just enjoy the money that appeared in our accounts not too long after we were returned to our rooms. I didn't see Rebecca or Daisy again. I tried to avoid seeing them as much as I could. I even quit my job and moved to another city. I often wonder what happened to Lucy, especially since the voice over the screen sounded like hers.
It was pitch black. The darkness seemed to engulf me in a hollow emptiness that left a pit hurling in my stomach that won't go away. Never mind that the back of my neck itched so badly, like I sucked in hot food without drinking any water. I shuffled hard against the chair. My wrists wouldn't move, nor did my legs bulge. What the hell is going on? I pushed some more, trying to free myself, but still nothing. How did I end up here? I thought. And then it hit me. The previous day, assuming it had been only a day since I blacked out, I'd been waiting for the bus when I found an iPhone 13 Pro ringing beside me. The number was not saved. Worried, but I knew just how expensive it was, and if someone misplaced that phone, then they'd probably not be able to stop thinking about it. I picked up. "Hello? Who's this?" the voice asked from the other side of the line. "Gabriel," I said, without thinking. "Who are you?" I asked back. The bus arrived, but I remained standing, waiting for the person on the other end to say something. "Lisa, The confidence seemed to dwindle just a bit as she said, "That's my phone." "Oh," was all I said. I can have it back to you. I found it sitting on the desk here." I replied hastily, trying to clear myself of any wrong thoughts. "That would be great," she said. "Bring it to 20 Lumbermore Street," she replied flatly. I peered through the darkness, trying to search for anything that showed me this was number 20 Lumbermore. There was nothing else, just this pitch blackness. "Hello?" I called out. "Anyone here?" My voice was broken, the walls echoing it back to me. Silence. I narrowed my gaze, trying to keep calm even though the bounds holding my wrists were now cutting into it. And still, the girl had not... My legs quivered just a bit. This had to be some sort of a nightmare that I would awaken from, and we'd have a good laugh about it later when we're up for drinks, I thought to myself, but it was no nightmare. I could feel the pain of the tiny string tearing through my flesh now, the warmness of my crimson blood accompanied by the stinging of the flesh-cutting bound. "Help!" I shouted at the top of my voice. My voice echoed back. This time, birds chirped as though mocking my scream for help. I gathered myself again, trying to keep my cool, trying to find a way out of this, but there was no way out of this. I was here, and there was no getting out of it. I narrowed my gaze. The darkness fought back, knocking out my sense. I ruffled the chair. Wrong decision. I closed my eyes, this time panic surging through me. This was not some stupid drunk game. This was real. The girl. She invited me inside for a cup of coffee. I'd sipped it. There was a loud ringing. I squeezed my eyes shut and groaned from the pain. It took a few seconds before I realized the ringing was coming from my head. The lights flickered on. An ancient bulb hole dangling a glowing golden bulb at the top of the room. I was forced to squint at the new brightness, so keen on driving me mad if it didn't drive me blind in the first place. The door creaked above me, and someone emerged from above, stepping down on woods that moaned with each step, accompanied by the minor catering of the tray in hand. "Hello there, handsome," she said with an oddly bright smile that reached her eyes, making it look as though she were squinting. I recognized her almost instantly. She'd been the one who opened the door. "Where am I?" I shot back. She flinched, as though I scared her. Her eyes watered, and almost instantly she broke out into unsteady tears, her hands trembling badly, water pouring out of her eyes, and a heavy sob broke from her mouth. I opened my mouth to speak, but words deserted me. I could not believe my eyes. Something was fundamentally wrong with her. She wiped the tears from her eyes and sniffed. When she raised her head, there were no more sobs. The tears had completely dried out. And now, she was staring at me with gleaming eyes again, as though expectant. I opened my mouth, but words would not reach my lips. Even if they did, I had no idea what I wished to say. What on earth's going on here?" I finally said. What is... She broke into another sob. "You mean you don't see I'm in love with you?" she murmured, batting her tear-reddened eyes at me now. I shook my head in disbelief, unable to find even more words. I stared at her, and she pushed the tray onto a table, walked towards me, crossing over until she was sitting straight on my thighs, face towards me. She raised my head to hers, pressed a kiss, and I pushed my head backward. She reached for me again, her lips pressing my neck with kisses, and back up my lips again. I fought to free myself from her, held back by the bounds. "Why?" she sobbed. "Why? You don't love me too?" she said. "I don't even know who you are!" I screamed. She stared at me now, startled by my profession. Then she grabbed my neck, her fingers digging into my skin. I winced as the sharp fingers pierced into me. "Look at me!" she shouted. My eyes shot wide open, staring at her menacing gaze. She stared back with a vicious look, void of the equally manically teenage look she had earlier on. I'm sorry," I murmured to her. I just want to go home," I crooned, trying to ignore the blinding pain stabbing through my wrist and ankles. "I don't want to hear you're sorry." "I want you to say you love me," she whispered. I gulped. She turned my face with enough force that if my neck was an inch lighter, it would have snapped in two. I opened my mouth and stared into her eyes. My eyes stung. I love you," I murmured with unfocused gaze. She stared at me with a glint of hatred in her eyes. "You're lying," she whispered. Her fingers held me even tighter in a vice grip. "You're lying to me!" She spat some more. I'm not lying. I love you," I blurted frantically, but I was too late. She slammed the tray over to me in fury, the food pouring over everywhere, metal clattering to the ground. She reached the chair near me and in one move reached under it, pushing upward until I collided with the ground. The world around me swirled for a moment. Something cold touched my fingers and everything became black. I opened my eyes to the shallow light illuminating through the crack from the wooden wall. My chair, still down on the floor, the ropes to my wrist still piercing into my skin, and the same metallic feel on my hand. I felt the edges of the small metal, realizing it had been the spoon from the tray. Desperately, I turned and began cutting through the bounds of my wrist in slow but deliberate motion, pressing my lips hard to keep myself from screaming as the metal brushed against sore skin. I had no idea how long passed. Only my fingers ached from pushing the spoon, but the bound finally came off. Quickly, I reached for my other hand, undid it, and then in the same hasty but careful movement to avoid tearing my injured skin, I freed my legs too. I climbed onto the stairs, pushing the door open. The house was quiet. I peered around, trying to catch a glance of her. My eyes reached the door, and with a quick dart, I made a run for it.
I watched as my boyfriend moved to and fro in McDonald's, expecting the order to have been up. I couldn't be more annoyed, but I had to keep it within me because we were outdoors. I had just caught him cheating, and the next thing he thought was going to be the best option for apology was McDonald's. It was true that I loved McDonald's, but to a certain level, which clearly didn't include forgiveness for cheating. I decided to be silent and just watch as he went about his little drama. After a few minutes, he dropped a tray of fries in front of me and stared at me with puppy eyes. I stared back at him blankly, not wanting to make any conversation or keep one. I pushed the tray further from myself and towards him, which caught him by surprise because there was one thing I couldn't reject, and it was McDonald's. I already said I was sorry. What else can I do? I told you I didn't know how it happened, and I really can't explain. I'm sorry, Grace, he said. I waited till he was done with speaking before standing up to leave. I was scared I was going to do something that I was going to regret later, and leaving was the best option to prevent such a situation. Sit back down. He pushed me back to the chair after getting up to stop me from leaving. I looked at him in shock at what had just happened and expected him to apologize. When he didn't, I stood up again and he repeated the same thing. I decided to still remain calm, especially with the number of eyes that were already staring at us and waiting for the next thing that was going to happen, so that they could blame someone and carry our faces on the internet. My boyfriend sat back down opposite me and continued to stare at me so much that it felt like he was boring holes into my skin. I ignored him and picked up my fries eventually. I knew we couldn't stay in McDonald's forever, and I was patient until then, hoping to get away from him forever. He was still talking about things I wasn't paying attention to when a loud noise was heard outside. A woman was yelling and cursing all at the same time, while the security guard was preventing her from entering the restaurant. To hell with all of you, she screamed loud enough for everyone to hear her. I looked at my boyfriend and some other people who looked as shocked as I was and were ready to go out to check out what was happening. Some were even up already. Some of the workers had stepped out to listen to what she had to say, and while she only kept shouting, not comprehensible and struggling to enter, many people that had gone out to try and defend her came back in to pick up their things and leave. I was expecting my boyfriend to do the same, but I was shocked at how much attention he gave to the woman, and the way he looked showed that he was not ready to remove his eyes or leave this place. I tapped him, and he only ignored me and picked his phone up to record. It was at that moment that I knew he was someone I didn't know anymore, and no matter what I tried, nothing was going to change, and walking out was the best option for us. Or at least it was the best option for me. The woman eventually found her way in, and with the way she acted, I knew that all she did outside was just the tip of the iceberg of what she initially planned. She threw away anything that was in her way and anyone that tried to stop her. Surprisingly, she was stronger than most of the men in the restaurant, and for a while, it motivated me about working out and gaining enough strength to beat up anyone that tried to stop me for any reason whatsoever, like what my boyfriend did earlier. "How dare you!" the woman yelled in my face. I looked around to be sure she was talking to me, and it was not someone close to me or behind me. When I realized that there was no one around me that she could have been talking to, I took a few seconds to stare at her very well to be sure I knew her, and I was not going crazy like she was. I tried to ask her for her name or something I could remember her by, and she slapped me as soon as I opened my mouth. I was in shock and actually expecting my boyfriend to somehow fight for me, but he stood where he was, recording what was happening between the woman and I. What she did was not as painful as much as the humiliation. I ignored everything and eventually tried to walk out, but the woman pulled me by the hair and pushed me to the ground. I immediately tried to regain composure, but not before I felt blood at the back of my head. "I'm sorry, but can you just tell me what I did?" I said weakly. I was expecting anybody at all to try and help me, but everyone just stared. The least I could wish for was that somebody had called 911, and if not, I was probably going to be left in my own pool of blood, maybe to die. I looked at my boyfriend one more time, and for a second, I could tell that I saw a smirk on his face that said he was happy about what was going on. I stretched my hands to him to help, for which he ignored. The woman kept pulling my hair and hitting me on various parts of my body. I couldn't fight to free myself from her because I was already weak from the first fall. I tried to apologize to her again, but it was almost of no use because she hit my mouth immediately after I opened it. I couldn't be grateful when I felt her lifting me up from the ground. I didn't know if she was the one who decided that what she did was enough, or someone came to my rescue, but either way, I couldn't be happier, especially because I already said my last prayers and wished everything well for certain people. "Stay away from Raymond," the woman yelled at me as she was being dragged out of the restaurant. I knew at that time that it couldn't have been anyone other than my boyfriend that caused all that had just happened. Could I blame him? I couldn't utter a word. I loved him too much. I felt bandages around my head and knew that someone had called 911. I said a little prayer for them as I was carried out of the restaurant. I didn't bother looking at my boyfriend again, and I decided that it was going to end there. I was not a dog to be used by him, and I for sure was not going to lose myself or parts of my body for him.
I rushed into the house feeling a tad nervous. I've been dropping things all day. I checked my phone. I still had 5 more minutes till the Zoom interview. I tossed my bag to the side, rushed to the mirror, checking to see my makeup was still intact. I stared at the blue top, sweat-burning wetness on some of the sides. I reached for my wardrobe, pulled out a gray suit, and put it on. My hands still trembled and my heart raced. It's not every time one gets an interview for their dream job. Plasma PLC had contacted me, reaching out to me a few hours after I'd updated my LinkedIn account, requesting for a Zoom call to do an interview fitting for a work-from-home assistant to help organize schedules and submit every day. It was the perfect fit for my schedule, and the pay was so good. I turned on my laptop, opening the Zoom software, checked my reflection one more time on the screen, then made sure everything was ready. I clicked the link on my email and joined the meeting. "Hello. Welcome, Elizabeth," James said, smiling. I stared at my screen, confused. There were over 5 others staring at the screen. I opened my mouth to say I was expecting a conventional interview, but closed it, refusing them to think I was scared of some other people gunning for the position. It was not until James started that I realized something was off. "Now that we're all here, I would love to set the rules straight. It's quite simple, actually. Working with us means there are consequences. And for us to carry out a real practical interview, every question here has its own consequences and rewards. If you wish to back out, now's the perfect time. But if you want to proceed, let me see your thumb." "What does he mean, consequences?" I asked. But the rest of the interviewees raised their thumbs, and I did the same. Again, not wanting to look clueless. "Perfect. Let's go." We each get turns. Each of you get to answer a question and get it right or wrong. However, once you miss your turn, it moves to the next person. We all nodded in agreement again. James turned his gaze from the screen, staring at something on his table. "All right. First question goes to you, Lisa," he said. I held my breath, pressing my fingers, trying to keep steady. "Have you done anything illegal that was not reported?" he asked. "No," I responded without thinking. "Wrong answer," he cut in. "When you were 11, you stole your neighbor's bicycle, hid it for a week until your mom found it." "That doesn't count as illegal. I was just a child doing..." "Consequences, Lisa. You were warned," he snapped back. I jerked back from the laptop, startled at the sudden seriousness. James adjusted his glasses again, and then every trace of the anger on his face vanished. I watched with bated breath as he rose and walked away from the camera. A few seconds later, the white screen behind him came to life. My jaw dropped as I watched in horror. On it, A woman was tied on her knees, dressed in a white dress, her eyes blindfolded. It took a few seconds before I realized who it was. "Mom?" I whispered. "Mom?" I screamed as I made out the face even more. A shudder raced through me now. I pushed my chair back, my heart pounding, and my gaze moved to the glinting black metal pressed against my mother's head, followed by a loud bang. I did not scream. I did not move. I just sat there, too terror-stricken to move. I stared at my mother's lifeless body, a rivulet of crimson blood racing from her head onto the floor. Everything else didn't matter. I stared at the screen, locked on the lifeless face of my mother. The screen went black, and James took his seat in front of the camera, leaning close. He adjusted his glasses again. Maxwell and Jack both left the Zoom meeting during the small display, and as I mentioned earlier, actions have consequences. I raised my hands to my mouth, watching as two masked men appeared on screen, standing behind Maxwell and Jack. I turned around, searching to see if there was anybody inside my room. There was no one. This has gotta be some serious joke. Mom couldn't possibly be dead. Two bangs went off, and the two screens splashed with blood. I shrieked, shutting my eyes. Every part of me wanted nothing but to slam the laptop closed, or shout him, call him out to be a psycho, but instead I remained frozen. The meeting was to last for only 30 minutes, and half of that was already gone. James moved to Andrew, asked him a question. Andrew answered correctly, because nothing seemed to happen. Then he moved to Sonia, the only other girl. I peered through my fingers. Sonia was trembling. "Sonia, what's the worst thing you've done?" James asked again. But Sonia was in no shape to talk. I stared at her, begging her to talk, and begging her to bide her time whilst I think of something to escape this. But there was no way to escape. I had to wait till it was time up. I had to sit it out. We were only three. Only three, which meant the questions would move faster. "Sonia, you have 2 minutes remaining," James said. Sonia stared. Her gaze was unfocused. She could not bring herself to stare away from the spot where Jack's and Maxwell's fields had been. I pressed my lips tight, stifling the moaning pain wanting to rush out of me. My breath seized in my throat. 1 minute, James said. We all watched. 30 seconds. It happened in a flash. 1 minute, she was fidgeting in front of the camera. The next, Sonia jerked from her seat, raced to the window of her apartment, and threw herself out of it. The air chilled around me. This was it. There was no way of getting out of this one. Death was certain. I held my breath, trying my best to keep my cool, but failing desperately. I closed my eyes, hot tears shimmering out of them. Andrew listened with rapt attention, waiting for James' next question. "Lisa, would you say that you were a good girl as a child?" he asked. I paused. I knew the answer, but 10 more minutes remained. I just had to waste as much as I could. My gaze turned to Andrew pleadingly. We could survive this. We could. If I used the whole of my time. I turned at the clock again. Although outside the camera's field, I hoped Andrew would understand. Andrew stared at me, long and hard, as I repeated the motion. He lifted his hand, revealing his watch on it, and both of us gave a curt nod. 1 more minute, James crooned. 30 seconds. 15. No, I answered. James stared at me, hard and long, then nodded. I noticed his attention move to Andrew. "Tell me, Andrew, what was the worst thing you did as a teenager?" he asked. Andrew was trembling badly. His fingers vibrated so hard you could hear them on the table. Sweat oozed from his face. His gaze remained unfocused. He stared at his watch. It was his 5 minutes. There was no way he would ignore the question. I could see him straining hard, trying to recall the worst thing. "Andrew, we are waiting for your response," James said. But Andrew was not listening. Every part of him was shaking now. 2 minutes, Andrew. he was having a heart attack. 1. I watched as the second hands clicked. Andrew struggling in his chair. James just watched him, calling the time. Gasps escaped my mouth just as Andrew collapsed to the ground. James sighed, as though disappointed Andrew had died without answering the question. Then turned to me. He picked out a card from the list. What age did you lose your virginity? I checked the clock hand. The second hand chimed at exactly 30 minutes since I joined the call. I'm afraid our time is up, Lisa, James said, as though he'd not just killed people and made it seem like this was a regular interview. And the line went dead.
I stared out the window, my heart pounding in my chest, threatening to rip out of its cage. I paced down the floor of my room, occasionally peering through the window blinds. I narrowed my gaze, trying to see through the darkness that fogged outside, but was met only by the blinding darkness. I bit my lips, continuing my pacing again. The soft tap on my window caused me to jerk again. I stared at the window again, fear coursing through my veins. This is sick. How could some wannabe psycho push every trace of sleep from my eyes? I had only logged into Omegle in a desperate attempt to ease up some of the tension. Not like it would be any help, but still, I had to try. Or rather, feeling naughty and horny, I knew there was only one place to get both online in abundance. It had helped, more than ever. It felt great. 1 minute, I was texting a stranger, completely anonymous as Omegle was, and the next I found myself rubbing my pussy behind the cab. The cab driver must have at one point seen me, because as I stepped out, he cast me a look that suddenly made me feel dirty, but I couldn't care less. I'd always been the type of girl to cross the lines just a bit. I made my way inside my apartment, taking off my clothes in the living room. It was then my phone buzzed. I paid no attention to it, tossing it on the couch. I was not really in the mood for any conversations, and exhausted from the long day, I walked towards the bathroom. My phone continued buzzing like the world was coming to an end. I groaned, turning back to the couch. Over 10 messages from a strange number. I opened the text, feeling my face burning. I clicked open the message. My jaw dropped. I blinked, trying to process what I saw. The stranger had sent screenshots of my conversation on Omegle. It is supposed to be anonymous, I thought. Staring at my screen, all my anger replaced with shock. Who the fuck are you? I texted back. He replied immediately. Someone who knows your secret. My anger returned now with so much force, my hands were trembling as I punched on the screen. How the hell did you get my number? Who the bloody hell are you? This time, he took a few seconds before replying. Bloody. That's exactly how this will turn out if you don't do as I say. I blinked. A chill ran through my spine, and all the anger I'd been feeling vanished at the blink of an eye, replaced by a sudden cold that wasn't from the weather or the spinning fan. I had begun typing again when my phone rang. He was calling me. He was fucking calling me. I stared at my phone, unsure of what to do. The call ended. Pick up, love. I tossed the phone to the bed. What was the worst he could do? Double-checking my door, I made my way to the bathroom, casting one glance at my phone. More buzzes. If he was still texting, then I was right to ignore him. Probably some sort of hacker who thought he could scare me. Truthfully, he half succeeded. I pushed my mind away from the thought, telling myself it was just some online prank. But when I stepped out, the room felt different. I scanned the room, wondering if it was my mind just being paranoid. My gaze rested on the door slightly ajar. A chill crawled up my spine as I stared at it. I had closed that door, I knew for sure. I walked carefully to the door, darting my gaze around searching for him. Just as I reached the couch, the sound of my phone caused me to jump out of my skin. I stared at the phone, my mind racing. What do you want from me? I said, trying to sound brave, but I knew I'd failed when my voice came out a pitch too high. He chuckled. You have a nice bedroom, he said. I froze, my eyes bulging out of their socket. He was in my house. I stuttered, unable to find the right words. Pink blanket you used to cover yourself in. Oh, Lord, your mattress feels so soft. The blood in my veins must have turned to ice by now. I turned around, picking up the knife from the kitchen. I made my way to the bedroom, trying to keep him on the line as I walked stealthily towards him. If I could sneak up on him, I grabbed a hold of the door's knob, sucked in a deep breath as I pushed the door slowly. I raised the knife, ready to strike as I charged in. The room was empty. My sheets ruffled as though someone had laid on the bed only minutes ago. "Why are you doing this?" I whimpered. "Come on now, don't cry on me. You love getting nasty. With strangers, don't you? We could do some nasty stuff." "Leave me alone or I'm calling the police," I blurted. "Don't you dare." His tone was serious now. By now I had enough. Without thinking, ended the call and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? The operator had barely spoken when the clattering of metal from the kitchen caused me to jerk. He's coming. Oh God. The scraping of metal on the wall grew louder with each passing second, bringing me to my impending doom. I quivered where I stood, cursing the day. "There's someone in my house. He's trying to kill me," I cried out to the operator as I hastily rushed to the door, locking it. I pushed away from the door like it was a diseased person, my chest pounding somewhere in my throat now. The sound of the metal scraped near the door, followed by the soft tap. I closed my eyes, opening them almost instantly. I would rather see him coming, thank you very much. I turned around the room, searching desperately for something to save me, then grabbed hold of my bed lamp, holding it tightly around my arms. I waited with bated breath, my eyes fixed on the door. The door swung open. I lurched at him, screaming as I slammed the lamp into him. He collapsed to the ground, writhing in pain. I darted for the door, not glancing back to see if he was standing up or anything, raced out of the house as fast as I could, my heart pounding in my chest. Only when I heard the blaring of sirens did I stop in front of the car, pointing to my apartment, trying desperately to catch my breath.
It was 2019. Crazy times, but not because of the reasons you all think of. I was an Uber driver then. It was my first job that I actually enjoyed. And hey, if you enjoy it here, then do like and subscribe. I like talking to people, giving and receiving advice, and meeting new and interesting characters. That's right, I'm a people person. One evening, I was just about to end my shift, but before I could clock out, I received a notification. Someone needed an Uber, and I was the closest one. I thought about it for a second. It was like I had a bad feeling, but I quickly snapped out of it. The person wanted me to go into the direction where my house was, so I thought, why not? I accepted the order and I drove towards the location. I drove up an alleyway. It was kind of dark and creepy, and above all else, it also started to rain. I saw a silhouette in the distance, and as I got close and my headlights landed on him, I could see facial features. He was a tall, skinny guy. His cheekbones were that of a model, and he had giant bags under his eyes. I pulled up right next to him. Jared? I asked. The guy didn't say anything. He just opened the door and hopped into the car. I started driving before making a few jokes about the weather. He didn't seem amused. He just stood there in silence in his creepy leather coat, strands of his wet hair falling in front of his eyes. I got the hint. Maybe he didn't like to talk. And I totally understood that. I mean, not everyone was like me. Do you know the feeling of everything crumbling around you? I suddenly heard. The guy spoke. The hair on my arm stood up at the sound of his voice. What do you mean? I asked, trying to maintain my composure. He didn't say anything. Then I thought maybe he was talking on the phone or something. But eventually he spoke again. We're all being lied to, and there's no escape. Almost no escape, he continued. The entire atmosphere turned bleak. Even the cheerful music that I was playing on the radio stopped, because of the weather, I think. Anyway, I kept driving, trying not to encourage him to get any deeper into his theory or whatever he was talking about. Okay, well, we're nearly here, I said. Here where? Where you set the destination? Oh no, it must be a mistake. My house is a couple of miles on that street, he said while pointing with his finger. I had to turn around and see the direction he was talking about. I told him that I'm only allowed to take him to where he set the initial destination, but the guy excused himself, saying that his finger might have slipped because of the rain. I took a deep breath. I knew I shouldn't have done that. I knew I should have dropped him off where he said the first time, but it was pouring outside and I'm a really nice guy. I couldn't let him walk in the rain, so I agreed. I started driving in the said direction. House after house, lamppost after lamppost. The street on which I was on was getting as repetitive as it could. It was like I was standing still. All the houses looked the same. I was starting to wonder if maybe he was drunk and if he forgot which house is his. "Now make a right here, please," he suddenly said. I complied, and as I was turning the wheel, I could hear him in the back, sliding on the seat. I looked into the mirror and I saw him right in the middle of the seat. I looked back. "I'm trying to see where we are. Is that a problem?" he asked. "Oh, no, not at all," I responded, focusing on the road. And I had to. It wasn't asphalt. Instead, the road seemed to be a construction site. And since it was raining, it got really muddy. I passed the last house I could see. That's when I asked him if we were going the right way. "Yes, my house is down the road. Keep going a little bit further," he said. I just wanted to drop this guy off and go home. I was done for the day, and his creepy vibe made me nervous. "Stop here," he suddenly said in a louder tone of voice. I slammed on the brakes. "We have arrived," he whispered. I couldn't see any house, and just to be sure, I asked him again if this was the right spot. He smiled and said, "It's the perfect spot." I didn't know what he meant, and before I could read the entire situation, his hand was around my neck. He started strangling me, and he pressed the button that made my seat go down. "Shut up and maybe you'll live," he said while he took out a big knife that reflected the light I had on in my car. "I'm going to take a kidney. It's not overly complicated, so don't worry," he said. I was freaking out. I tried to get out, but the sharp blade was pressed against my throat. "I'm going to put you to sleep now, so that'll go smoothly." Then he proceeded to take out a cloth, and with one hand, he put some sort of liquid on it. "This will make you fall asleep in no time. Don't worry," he whispered in my ear. I was panicked more and more. Why did I ever accept this stupid last ride, I said to myself. I could see my life flash before my eyes. That piece of fabric was heading towards my nose, but I noticed that he took the knife away from my neck. Maybe he thought I won't move, but how wrong was he? I put the car in drive and pressed so hard on the gas, the acceleration made him fall on his back also. I got up before he could do anything. "I'm gonna kill you," I heard. At that moment, I opened the door and jumped out. The car continued to go forward and it crashed into a tree. "Oh my gosh, what the heck is going on?" I said while I checked myself to see if I'm all right. And I was. I was also covered in mud, but that wasn't the problem. I went over to check on the guy in the car. Slowly, I peeked through the window. I saw blood. I put my hand over my mouth. I hope I didn't kill him. But as I opened the door, the guy was gone. He must have snuck out through the driver's door. Even so, there was blood on the back seat. He must have cut himself when I accelerated the car. I immediately started running towards the first house. I stood there because I felt a little bit safer, and I called the police. They couldn't find him, even to this day. But I was lucky to get out of that entire situation alive.
If my story's reached you, it's too late for me. I've accepted my fate, and I can hold my hands up high in the knowledge that I probably deserve everything that's coming my way. I, like you, have secrets. Secrets that keep me awake at night, living out scenarios where my nearest and dearest discover them and recoil in horror. Like a lot of 20-somethings, I spend far too much time on the internet, mindlessly going from website to website, clicking link after link until I'm lost amongst the IP-hidden darker websites that people warn you to stay away from. I have a secret laptop. Bought it secondhand from a PC fair. Never entered any of my real details on it. Never purchased anything on it with an account that's attached to the real me, and only use it in the dead of night when I want to visit sites that gravitate towards more illegal activities. I love to scroll through the marketplaces and see what people try to sell on the dark web. You wouldn't believe the kind of things I've come across. I've seen more adverts for drugs than you'd believe. Fake passports, fake pregnancy tests, forged documents, adoption opportunities. And the most interesting of all, hitmen. As soon as I saw my first advert for a hitman, my heart began to pump that little bit faster. The idea that I could talk to someone who took people's lives for a living, and one step further flirt with the idea of hiring them to remove any problems in my life. I found myself daydreaming quite often about hiring a hitman to kill one of my neighbors, so I could watch from my window at a safe distance without them knowing. 2 doors down lives a douche who lets his dog out every night and watches as the mutt leaves his mess all over my front lawn. He just watches and does nothing, leaving it for me to deal with. I wanted him gone. The excitement that thought created in me was something else. I began searching more and more for hitmen. I joined multiple message boards where people discussed hitmen, and some even claimed to be hitmen, but I don't think any of them were the real deal. You know how it is. There's only so long you can observe before you take the plunge and get your feet wet. So I posted a message on one of the boards I frequented. I requested more details from a professional killer in the area where I'm from. Didn't take long for people to start commenting. It was easy to spot the trolls, but one comment stood out. When I posted, all I gave was a vague description of where I was from. The comment left was one simple word: Richmond. Richmond is the street I live on. I thought I was being so careful, never to divulge any hint of my real life on this laptop. Yet 12 minutes after posting on that message board, someone had commented the street I live on. They were the real deal, there was no doubt about it, and they wanted me to know. Next, a notification came through. I'd received a private message from an unknown user. They invited me to a live stream and told me that if I wanted proof of their capabilities, tonight was the perfect opportunity. My mouth ran dry, and my heart palpitated so hard I swear it wanted to burst out of my chest. My hands began to shake as I typed out, "Okay," and clicked the link to the live stream. At first, the screen was blank. My reflection as I sat hunched over the laptop was the only thing staring back at me. Soon enough, the screen burst into life. I had to give it to him, he was innovative. He'd strapped a GoPro to his head, so we were getting a first-person view of whatever this guy was up to. He looked down at his hand, and he had a mini Bluetooth keyboard in his hand. He began typing. At the bottom of the live feed, his message popped up. "Are you ready for this?" A flurry of messages appeared underneath. Must not have been the only one watching. Everyone typing "yes" in eager anticipation. I was excited, still unsure of what I was about to witness. He looked forward and gave us our first real look at his surroundings. He was in a motel hallway. Multiple room doors on either side of the corridor gave his location away. He began walking forward, each step almost silent. He walked with absolute purpose, focused. It wasn't long until he reached the room he was looking for. Taking a small silver pick out of his pocket, he made light work of breaking into the room undetected. We all watched silently as he crept around the unlit room, making his way to the bedroom where we could hear snoring coming from. As he entered the bedroom, I could make out the silhouettes of 2 adults asleep in the bed. He made his way round to the far side of the bed where a man was sleeping. He glanced at the person next to him. A woman with long blonde hair lay on her side, with her back facing the man. She too was in a deep sleep. I watched with mixed horror and excitement as the killer covered the man's mouth with one hand, causing the man to open his eyes wide in alarm. Before he could even utter a single sound, the killer with his other hand slid a blade up through the man's chin, burying it deep into his skull. Blood began to trickle down the knife handle and over the killer's hand as the man began to lightly spasm and go rigid. The chat at the bottom of the screen began to go wild with messages of all caps letters responding of encouragement, followed by more messages urging the man to kill the woman too. It's been days, and I can still see the look on her face as she casually rolled over and hazily opened her eyes and witnessed who I assume was her husband laying there slaughtered. Before she had fully comprehended the situation, she had found herself in the killer's grip. The man slashed the woman's throat, sending an arc of sprayed blood across the bedroom wall and bed sheets. He left the same way he came, silently and without trace. Once he made his way outside and back to his vehicle, a message popped up on screen. "Choose our next victim. Direct payment for a specific target, or we spin the wheel for someone in chat. If you were active during tonight's event, your name has been added to the draw, regardless of whether you leave now or not." The chat once again exploded with comments. This time everyone chanting, "Spin that wheel!" like some dark, macabre game show. An animation of a spinning wheel appeared on screen, divided up into sections like a pie, each piece a different color and a username. Mine was highlighted for easy tracking from my computer. I watched with held breath as the wheel spun for what felt like hours. Ever so slowly, the spinning motion began to decrease, coming to a stop. I sat there in numbed silence as my name, circled on the screen, slowly came to a stop under the spin wheel pointer. Users in the chat began to chant my username. Another message appeared on the screen. "You have been selected to take part in the next event. You have 7 days to get your affairs in order. Do not attempt to flee, notify the police, or involve loved ones. Fleeing? I will find you. The police cannot protect you. I will kill everyone you try to get involved. Thank you for watching." The next few days, I walked around in a daze. When people spoke to me, it was as if I was trying to listen to them from the bottom of a swimming pool. My head and chest equally felt like they were about to explode and implode at the same time. Every waking moment, I wasn't a walking zombie. I was refreshing the link to see if the killer was going live. I figured I could watch him, and then at least be prepared for his arrival. 2 days ago, I received a notification with an attachment. It was a video from the killer. It was a video of me, sleeping at my computer desk, in the clothes I was still wearing. He'd already been in my house. Not only that, but it had been within hours of me watching that video. He sent several videos. I guess they were to remind me of the rules. One video showed me on my mobile. I was speaking to a friend who had called me, asking about something I wasn't even paying attention to. Another was of my parents asleep in their beds, and the third was of my little sister asleep in her bed. I may be a monster myself, but I couldn't risk any harm to my family. I had to accept my fate. This brings me to earlier today. Less than 2 hours before this recording, the live stream started. It showed the killer preparing his tools, the weapons he was planning on bringing with him. I watched it with an eerie calm. I watched as he entered his vehicle and ended the live stream, saying he was on his way. I was still watching there when the live stream sprang back into life. I watched as he walked slowly up my porch and tried the door handle. I watched as he entered my house without issue and made his way silently up my stairs. I watched as he entered my room and crept up on the figure in my chair, back to the door, the live stream on screen. I watched as he sank the blade through the top of the skull of my neighbor. I had asked him to come around and watch a video I'd found. He was reluctant at first, but I begged him less than half an hour ago while the live stream was down. I watched as the killer stood there in silence, not quite sure what was going on or who this person was. I crept up behind the killer, my sister's school tie pulled tight between my hands. I swiftly pulled the tie over his head and across his throat, cutting off the circulation. He tried to resist, but with me being overweight, he couldn't counter the surprise attack. My weight has very little advantage, but when choking someone out and forcing my whole weight on top of them, for them to push back against, I certainly had the upper hand. Chat went mental at first, a mixed response of anger, as their form of entertainment no longer was alive, and excitement due to what they had just witnessed. Another message popped up on screen as I was disposing of the body. "You think he was the only one we had? Accept your fate. They're coming." So, this is why I'm leaving this message. I have a bag packed, and I plan on seeing a few sights before I meet my end. As I said at the beginning of this, I've accepted my fate, but it doesn't mean I'm going to make it easy for them. Just remember, if you ever do get bored and start searching through sites you know you shouldn't visit, actions have consequences, some greater than others. It was Saturday morning, and I was lying in my bed playing an online strategy game on my phone. My mom said I was addicted to my device, but I didn't agree with her. I merely had things to do on it most of the time. While raiding, I lost a lot of troops and ran out of resources, so I couldn't recover yet. I was about to send out my troops to gather resources when I got a suggestion asking me to watch ads and gain a ton of resources. And without delay, I clicked on it. As the ad started to play, advertising a cheesy interactive choice game that I could allegedly play and win real prizes, I turned away, patiently waiting for the 30 seconds to pass. But when the video closed, it did not return to the game. Instead, it showed a pop-up on my screen. Congratulations, you're our 1,200,000th visitor today, and you've just won a new iPhone 12 Pro. Click here to claim your reward. I rolled my eyes at the scam and clicked on the X at the corner of the screen to close it. It did not close. Instead, another pop-up appeared. Are you sure you want to miss your reward? I clicked it again, slightly frustrated. These scammers were getting desperate. For a third time, another pop-up filled my screen. Caroline Elizabeth Harper, this is your last chance to claim your reward. I backed away from my phone. How did they know my name? There was no way they had access to my information. I didn't use my real name, even in the games I played. But if they knew my name, did that mean they were legit? What did I have to lose anyway? I needed a new phone because mine lagged, and the screen had cracked thanks to my brother's carelessness. Besides, this was an iPhone 12 Pro. I'd hate myself if it turned out to be legit. I clicked on Accept Reward this time. A site opened up next. Basically, it looked like a legit company that owned the interactive game I'd seen in the ad. There was only one clickable option on the screen, which was play free trial and win. Seeing no other choice, I tapped on it. It opened up a story, and the title said that the selected mode was family drama. I was asked to choose the order of my family, and I modeled it after my real family. The story started off with a regular family setting, and I had to make everyday choices. Now, at first, the choices were straightforward and ordinary, but as the game progressed, the story took on a darker turn. However, I could not bring myself to stop playing. I was no quitter, and I wanted that reward. As the story unfolded, I realized I was playing as a psycho tormenting my own family. At the end of the story, I had a knife in my hand and was left with a choice of which of my family members to murder and how. I found myself wondering how much I wanted the iPhone. Enough to virtually hurt a member of my family? I closed my eyes and selected at random, briefly acknowledging the choices I'd made in the back of my mind. The game ended, and the words, "Thank you for playing," appeared on the screen. Beneath it, in ominous red letters, were the words, "Expect your reward soon." I was asked to fill in my details for the shipping company, and I did. Hours later, I was deeply unsettled, so I researched the company. The results I found were conspiracy theories, but they sent panic racing through me. Apparently, the site I saw was speculated to be a front used by a serial killer who made the family members choose his victim for him. I was still panicking when my mom rushed into the room looking frazzled. "The police just called," she said. "My brother had been involved in an accident and was being rushed to the hospital. His brakes had been cut." I felt a lump rise in my throat. That was the choice I'd made.
My name is Sophia, and I am an art undergrad. Trust me, I know I couldn't have picked a better major if I wanted to earn peanuts. For a course that didn't pay much, studying art cost an arm and a leg. Being dirt broke at 25 will cause you to do a lot of things that sound insane. Not only that, but being broke at 25 is also an avenue for things to happen to you. I came to know this last Saturday at Ava's house. My friend Ava lived in an apartment building uptown, unlike my apartment, which was pretty run down in all the ways that an apartment could be run down. Ava, apart from the beautiful house, had two things I didn't have, or rather couldn't afford to have: Netflix and a huge LED television with all the latest features and the most stunning display I had ever seen. Deep down, I simply hated the fact that I could not afford such things in life. So when Ava asked me if I could help house sit and take care of her dog, I didn't hesitate to say I was in. I was in school and had been bored out of my mind. I didn't have an active plan that weekend, apart from downloading shows to watch on my phone using the free-to-use piracy sites. "I will be gone for 3 days," Ava said as she searched her handbag to give me what had to be either money or the key. To my delight, it turned out to be both. Before she left, I asked her for her home's Wi-Fi password, which she happily provided. On the first day, I did most of the chores that she asked me to do. By evening, I was almost done but was so tired, I decided that it would be wise to take a break. I sat on the couch, and with a flick of a button, the television came on. I browsed through the movies and ended up just going with a random one. I started the movie and enjoyed my drink peacefully. It was a film about a guy with relationship issues. Can't really remember if I'm telling the truth. What I remember through was halfway through the movie, I began hearing voices from the opposite apartment. It wasn't the sound of ghosts or anything. It was the sound of two people who were arguing. About what? I couldn't really tell. I dismissed the sound and continued watching till I fell asleep. The second day began with me in the doorway holding the leash to Miles, Ava's dog, as we were about to go for a walk. To be honest, Miles could be a pain in the arse, but I wasn't going to complain, as I had been paid well and needed all the money in the world. I was about to leave when the door opposite Ava's apartment opened. Standing at its door was a man with a big black eye. The sight caught me off guard, leaving me staring at the large black mark over his left eye. "You're gonna walk the dog?" he asked, pointing at Miles. "Yes," I answered. "Could you help me walk mine? Starcatcher has been getting antsy being stuck indoors," the man with the black eyes said. My rejection was at the tip of my tongue and was almost out of my mouth when he said the words that caused me to pause. "I can pay you," the man said. I pretended to give it a thought before giving him the answer I had already settled on immediately. More money. Wow. Seeing my face, the man shakily put his hand into his pocket and brought a wallet holding what I would describe as a fuck ton of money. I took Starcatcher and Miles and walked through the streets before returning to the building. I knocked on the door expecting to see the man with the black eye, but it was a woman who opened the door. "What do you want?" the woman asked. "I want to return Starcatcher," I said, offering the leash to her, which she snatched and without sparing a word, smacked the door in front of me. I sat down to watch Netflix when I started hearing some noise. If I remember correctly, it was similar to the noise I had heard last night. I went close to the door and placed my ear on it. I could hear the words being said through the door. "You should be ashamed," the voice sounded. The voice died down not long after, and I returned to watching until evening, and that was when the argument began again. The argument was followed by a guttural scream that caused my heart to skip a beat. I stood from the couch after the scream and slowly walked towards the door. I could feel my heart beating at a rate that couldn't have been good for my body, and it only continued as I reached closer to the door. As I swung the door open, I caught sight of the woman that I had seen earlier atop of the man. The man was not completely in his senses, like he was drugged or something. And then, what I noticed next shook me to the core. The woman was mercilessly squeezing the balls of the helpless man on the floor. "Call 911, my mind screamed to my body, but I couldn't do anything except watch. My entire body felt stiff with disobedience. Somehow, I broke the rigor and reached for the phone in my pocket when the woman looked up and screamed at me. "You bitch, drop the phone now!" she shouted as she stood up from the man's body and walked towards me. I ran back in Ava's apartment, but forgot to lock the door in a hurry. I hid behind the couch, trying to protect myself from the crazy lady. I reached for my phone, only to remember that I had dropped it in the passageway. The house went quiet before the banging began again, and an unintended scream came out of my mouth. The scream only increased as the door to Ava's house opened. The woman, she was surprisingly strong. She lifted me easily by my hair. "Please don't kill me," I pleaded. "You've been the bitch fucking my husband, haven't you?" the woman said. "No, all this has been a big misunderstanding." "Shut the fuck up. Not a word more. I know what all has gone into that dirty mouth of yours." I wanted to explain that I was just house sitting, but before I could get the words out, Ava's dog attacked. It didn't fill me with confidence when I heard whimpering after he was swung to the chair at the side of the living room. I ran out of the window and climbed the fire escape down, where I saw a police car. The police came back with me, but the woman had disappeared, as though she never existed, leaving the man in pain and Ava's dog bruised. That was the last time I allowed money to dictate my decisions.
I switched on my laptop and opened up Omegle for the 10th time in the last 12 hours. It was the only thing to do when there was no one to talk to, especially with a husband like mine who did nothing but nag all the time. I wasn't sure I was guilty of anything he accused me of, but still I couldn't care less as well. Maybe he found me ugly. I don't know. I opened the website and I started chatting. There was a girl who was 27 years, a year younger than I was, or so I thought, because it's what she put there. I hit escape and then accepted the request of one of the men, and as soon as I did, pictures began to load in our chat page with images of myself doing things. I didn't even know anyone was looking at me during that moment. I looked back in my room because there was another picture of myself right where I sat, wearing what I was wearing at that moment. I stood up and I checked around for any cameras, but there was nothing there. I got confused and I ran out of the room, but ran back to the room to hit escape. But he escaped before I got back to the room, which made me even more confused. I researched for the name online, but it was almost like no use because there were so many people with the name bad_karma. I tried to get my mind off of it and all, and just got busy with other things I found myself doing. The next day I felt a huge feeling in my heart telling me to wake up. I got up and noticed the red dot from my laptop camera. It was weird because even if I was a computer illiterate, I knew the light meant that the camera was on, and I got up immediately. I knew I didn't switch it on before going to bed. "Stop it," I said to the camera before trying to switch it off. The light came on again immediately after. I yelled back at the camera and switched it off again. It came back on and it went on and on like that until I got tired and just closed the laptop. I knew Omegle is a safe place, a place where you could chat with so many people and socialize, but whoever it was probably trying to get me to read it the other way around. Suddenly, a loud knock hit my door. I jumped out of the bed, and when I checked the time, it was 1 a.m, which got me more confused because I knew my husband was still going to be playing games by that time or was probably asleep on the couch. "Who is it?" I asked out loud, but there was no reply. I waited for a few seconds, and when no one replied, I went back to bed. Two could play this game if whoever was behind the door wanted to play. The knock came again louder and quite impatient the second time. I ignored it and waited for the person to say something, but there was still no word from the other side. I remained silent as well. Then, a text popped up on my phone which took my gaze away from the door for a few minutes. The text was filled with letters that could almost move the heart of someone to the other part of their chest. "Blood, end you." The text read the same thing for the first 3 lines until I made up my mind to open the door and see whoever it was behind it. If I died that way, so be it. I turned the doorknob, and before I could pull the door towards me, the other person on the other end pushed it with so much force that I found myself on the floor. My husband stared back at me with frustration. I immediately felt bad for keeping him outside for so long. "You should have said something about the fact that you were the one behind the door," I told him. "In my house? By 1 a.m? Were you expecting someone else?" He gave me a look of disgust. I panicked thinking about the thoughts running through his mind. "Whatever then," I told him before going back to bed. The continuous sound of my phone woke me up, and just as I was about to pick it up, it stopped. And when I laid it back down again, it started again. My husband hissed continuously and looked so irritated from all the noise. I apologized to him and switched off my phone before going back to bed. I woke up the next morning, still bothered about whoever was behind the disturbance I had been having before now. I noticed my husband was not beside me, but didn't give it so much thought because I just thought he was with our baby. That was going to make sense. According to him, a good wife couldn't wake up by 11 a.m, especially if she had a child to take care of, but what could I do? It was just how I was. I decided to switch on my laptop and visit Omegle, and was in the process of doing that when I heard my daughter crying. She was not so much of a baby who cried, and by that I knew something was wrong. I stood up immediately to check up on her, but on getting to the door I realized that it was locked from inside. I froze for a second. It was always a rule between my husband and I not to lock the door to the crib because of emergencies like the one I had to deal with at this moment. I heard someone struggling to do something in her room, and I just couldn't wait anymore. I searched the whole house for the extra key, and without delay, I opened the door and found my husband on the floor with open boxes next to him. One of the boxes was filled with his clothes, and the other was filled with my daughter's clothes. He stared at me with disgust in his eyes and sworn hatred. He ignored me and picked up his phone. "Hello," I heard my husband say behind me. "Plan spoiled. I can't come to your place with the baby anymore." "Yes, I love you too." He ended the call after that. My heart broke at the last sentence. He loved another person? I knew he didn't like me as much as he did before, but being in love with another person was just an entirely different thing. He didn't say a word to me before he walked out of the room. His laptop gave a quiet sound a few seconds after he left, and I didn't even stop myself from checking whatever it was. He had broken my heart. I could as well know who he did it for. Omegle was open on the screen and clear as day. My username and our chat was displayed on the screen. My heart broke when I realized who he was all along. Bad_karma? I questioned myself in disbelief. I strolled up to see all the pictures he sent me. He was the one who made me so emotionally unstable and toyed with me. I couldn't stop the tears that fell down my cheeks. He walked in later and laughed really hard when he realized that I knew about everything. "Good, now you know the truth, and I see that there's no need for me to confess anymore," he said before picking up his laptop. "I'm leaving the house for you for good," he said and walked out. I heard the door close behind him, and I could only burst into another round of tears.
The disease the scientists called spots continued to increase exponentially every day. No one knew what caused the disease or why there were so many people who had the disease, with at least one new person joining the figure almost every day. The disease was easily recognized with black spots around the thumbs of the person, which got bigger and bigger, like it was logged with liquid, and it had never busted for anybody. It only got bigger and always caused unbearable pain, which the person who had it couldn't bear. The scientists, even with all their research from those who had the disease, couldn't place the reason on a particular thing, and they only came up with the solution to the problem, which was trying out vaccines and drugs on different people as experiments to see which was going to work. I had just come back from the restaurant when my mom lashed out at me for coming back a minute late, because to her, it meant I wasn't keeping myself safe because of how dangerous it was out there. I couldn't argue back with her because it was not exactly her fault that I was still in her house after so many years. 28 years was definitely a long time to be with someone, especially when it was someone you didn't have a good relationship with. My mother and I weren't all close for no particular reason, it just happened like that. "I'm sorry," I told her, and left the sitting room. I was not interested in making the conversation longer than that. Besides, I had other important things to do, like unboxing my new iPhone. I took a very long, nice shower after I got to my room. I just had to set up my phone and get a good sleep right after because it was night already, and my mom could keep her food for all I cared. She wasn't providing for me before now, and I couldn't care less that she was not even going to try to do that tonight if she'd wanted to. I sat on my bed and thought about everything that happened at work today before bringing out my new phone. It was the latest phone in town, which everyone used, and I'd begun to save right from the first time I've heard of it, just so I too could have one. The phone was so nice, and the fact that everyone had it made it a prized possession. Brenda. The tag on the pack was carefully designed. I had to give kudos to whoever designed it, even though the person was in absentia. Something in me felt disturbed when I picked up the phone, but I just read it as a sign of joy at the sight of the phone. I did all that I needed to with the phone and plugged it in before I finally fell asleep. My mom's voice was what woke me up the next morning. She'd been hitting my door and shouting at the top of her voice. I continued to ignore her because I wasn't just ready for whatever it is she wanted to say. "What?" I yelled back at her. I really need to get out of this house as soon as possible, I thought, before getting out of the bed to open the door to hear whatever she was going to say. I was just sure it was something that wasn't my business. I opened the door, and as much as I wanted to ignore whatever brought her to my room that early in the morning and made her shout that much, I still wanted to hear it. I noticed the look of fear on her face, and I was just forced to ask her what was wrong. She turned the screen of her phone to me, and there it was. the very news I didn't want to hear or see as much as she didn't. My coworker had the same disease everyone had been running from. I thought of calling him to make sure he was okay and to ask how he got it, but I decided not to. What if he didn't want to talk to anyone and I was just disturbing myself? I looked back at my mom, and her eyes were focused on one thing. I called her several times, and when she didn't answer, I traced her eyes to what she was looking at, and my eyes landed on my thumbs. And I was almost in shock as well. It's not possible, I argued with whoever was ready to listen to me, even if it was just my own ears. I'm always careful. I wear gloves, masks, and long clothes every time I'm out there. My mom walked out of the room, picked the keys, and locked me in. I banged the door and yelled for her to open the door. The more I applied force on my thumbs, the more the black spots grew, and I decided to stop. After a few minutes, a government bus arrived at the entrance of the house, and before I could even get an explanation of what was going on, they bundled me out of the room before I could pack anything. I begged my mom to stop them, but she only said they were here to help and she was going to come see me later. I argued with the men for a while before we got to the van, and they pushed me to the back of the van before driving off. When they stopped and they brought me out of the van, we were in front of what looked like a deserted building in the middle of nowhere, except that there were people there walking from one part of the building to the other. I noticed that they were all the same when we got inside the building. In fact, we were all the same. The building was for everyone who had the disease. I saw Casper from afar, and the moment he saw me, he ran to me with a hug. I'm not happy with this, but I'm glad I'm not here alone, though. Everyone's cranky here, and I don't know why, he said. You got me. We got each other, I told him with a weak smile. Every day and every minute, we woke up and hoped that the scientists would find a cure, or at least an answer to the burning question on the mind of everybody. How did we get the disease? Only until the scientists came around to give us the answer did we begin to think of how stupid we must have been, or how careless we'd been. What caused the disease was something no one could ever think of. The case of the iPhone we were all rushing to buy. The cases had been covered by a germ that a scientist had created for a project which somehow got out carelessly, and they could not be returned after the phones were shipped out. And here we were, suffering for it. I saved for this? I rubbed my thumb and just slumped in a chair after the scientists began an experiment of another vaccine they thought was the solution. We're definitely going to be here for a long time, Casper said. The last 2 years changed the whole world, but most of all the business sector. Everyone had to keep their businesses going somehow, and most companies resorted to online calls. It wasn't so easy working with an online presence because it wasn't as effective as being in the company and around people physically, but somehow we all got used to it and it became the norm. I, for one, loved the online thing because it meant I didn't have to deal with so many people, which was like the only problem I had. Dealing with people was the number one turnoff for me. And the fact that the world had to go digital just a month after I got a well-paying job was the best thing that could ever happen to me. I hated the fact that the whole world was on lockdown, which meant I couldn't also go to my favorite places, but what could I do? I had to focus more on the advantages. I placed my coffee gently on the table as I waited for the next 15 minutes to go by. I was patiently waiting for the meeting I had for 10 o'clock in the morning. Most of the meetings we had now were on Zoom, which was also the same as being there physically because you got to see their faces and hear their voices, including some of the annoying ones, but I couldn't run from it either way. Eventually, it was time for the meeting, and I logged in. Everyone was quiet, which was awkward considering the fact that they were always noisy and said anything and everything that came to their mind, even if it wasn't related to the topic that was supposed to be discussed in the meeting. Okay, I kind of love this, I thought, and just waited for whoever was going to talk first. I was running out of patience and was about to say something, even if it was only hi, before the boss spoke up. I was even more surprised that she was quiet because she was the kind to always voice out and say random jokes when everything was getting boring and no one didn't have anything to say. Okay, let's get to the topic we called this meeting for, she said. The meeting was actually going to be a brief one, or long, depending on how much people wanted to talk, but considering the fact that they were all silent already, I doubted that the meeting was going to be long. The boss only called the meeting to hear ideas of people on what we could do online to boost the business. Now, I wasn't going to say anything, but I had to be in the meeting because, according to the boss, I was new to the company and should know how the meetings went, since I wasn't allowed any physical meeting with them. It was probably for my own good, because I would almost die from an anxiety attack seeing so many faces staring at me. After about 10 minutes, the network of almost everyone on the call went off, leaving only myself and another woman who was really close with the boss. I thought the best thing was not to say anything and wait for the network of others to clear off so that we could continue the meeting. After about 5 minutes, the network still didn't come back to normal, and they left the call, leaving a message to try to come back later, which left me and the woman alone. She continued staring at me. Her eyes were so fixed on my face, which got me scared. I couldn't leave the call because I didn't want to seem rude, and I didn't want to say anything just because I didn't know what to say that wasn't going to sound rude to her, judging from the way she looked at me with an emotion I could tell was hatred. I just thought she didn't like me because it was normal for some people not to like you in the midst of so many people. But I didn't know what she felt towards me was as much as what I could see boldly written on her facial expressions. I'd had enough of her. I was about to hang up for my own peace of mind when she finally spoke up, which caused me to stop in my tracks to listen to what she had to say. Of course everyone likes you and all that, but also know that I have every single piece of information about you. Where you live, your friends, the things you eat, and any other thing you could think of which should be private. That's what I know. Now, I'm not telling you to be careful or anything like that. I don't like things like that. They're games for the weak. I'm putting it to you plainly that you must quit the job at the company because I don't want you here. And if you don't listen to what I tell you, there's a repercussion for it, which is nothing close to how gentle I am right now. You would regret not listening to my instructions if you decide to be stubborn. I was shocked. She was the kind of woman who, even though mean, I thought she was going to like me in the long run like I'd seen in the movies. But it was probably far from it at this moment. I didn't say anything, but slightly pressed the record button on the keyboard before going back to staring at her. At least whatever she said now was going to be on record, and she could not lie against her own voice. That was a fact. I'm sorry, I don't understand. You didn't get me this job, and I don't think you have the right to tell me not to work anymore. The confidence came from somewhere, and I didn't even bother to know where it came from. I needed it at that point to escape the dilemma the woman was trying to put me in. I see you have some boldness, but I'm sure you would not wish death upon yourself at 28 years. But if that's what you want, I would happily be ready to help, because it is what I do best. I didn't know what I was supposed to be more scared of. The fact that the woman was way different from what I knew, or the fact that she talked death nonchalantly like it was nothing special, when in fact death was a big thing. I stopped recording the video and just waited for her to finish her drama and give me the permission to end the call. I'm gonna leave you alone, but that would be forever. And the only way that would happen would be for you to actually die. You know that, right? She smirked after her first sentence. Well, you might believe me or not, but... She brought out a gun and pointed it at the screen, towards my head, before licking her thumb and sliding her thumb over her neck to signify the one thing she had been saying. Then she ended the call immediately. I was shocked for a minute before I eventually logged out of Zoom. I was going to send a complaint immediately. How was I supposed to deal with what I just saw? Not even physically, but on a call. I just wish I didn't stop recording the call before she brought out the gun.
Jake and I were so excited about the prospect of going away for the weekend that we didn't stop to look up where it was that we were going. Only that we knew no matter where we went, as long as I wasn't pushing myself to my limits, working my ass off, and he wasn't glued to his laptop, trying to convince clients to trust him, or listen to them make ludicrous requests. The weekend could not come fast enough. Time always has a way of going against one's wishes, and even though I tried distracting myself with other thoughts, I could not help but keep looking at the calendar, marking the days until our vacation. When it finally came, Jake and I packed our bags, set out in the company's car that arrived earlier that day, with one of the drivers Jake said was used to carry the executives. He greeted us, opening the door to let us step in, addressing us as sir and ma'am. The drive was long. I slept off, woke up, and cradled myself on Jake's arms when it rained and got too cold. By the time we arrived at the cottage, the rain was pouring heavy. We raced to the cottage from the car, the rain beating down hard on us like droplets of rocks. The driver hauled our luggage inside. I offered for him to wait until the rain lowered a bit before going back outside, but he declined. He stepped out of the house before I could insist, vanishing under the sound of the heavy rain. I was shivering. Jake offered to get me out of my wet clothes into something warm, and by warm, he meant his arms. I was more than eager to do both. Our sex life hadn't really been great, not since the pursuit of money took over our lives. My stomach gave protesting grumble. "We should order some McDonald's," I said as I wrapped my hand around Jake. "Not sure with the weather they'll be able to get here," Jake said before pressing his lips to mine. I insisted, and we placed our orders just before Jake hauled me off the floor and my legs wrapped around him, leading me to the bedroom.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
And we were already slipping into sleep when the heavy pounding of our door caused us to jerk awake. Jake stared at me, just as clueless as I was about who was knocking. Maybe it's the driver, and he forgot something, or it was the delivery man. Jake pulled his shirt on and made out of the room. I followed behind him, unable to sit idly inside when the knocking came again, harder this time. Jake tried peering through the peephole. "Who's that?" I whispered behind him. He shook his head, then turned the lock to open the door. A cold chill ran through my spine now. I pulled my clothes over my body even more, covering my exposed breasts. Jake opened the door and stepped out. He stared out, but with the storm that just ended, it was impossible to see farther than a few feet ahead. "Come back inside, Jake," I told him. But instead, Jake took another step forward, craning his head to see something. I reached out to pull him inside, and that was when I saw it too. Someone was standing just outside, beyond our line of vision. I could make out the dark shape of him, near one of the trees almost indistinguishable from it. I froze, my throat going dry almost instantly. I stood frozen, staring at the figure. Jake took another step towards the image. "Jake," I called out, but Jake didn't respond. I was torn between stepping out into the cold night with him and returning inside the safety of our cottage, although I'm not sure safety is the right word to use right now. "Hold your phone and be ready to call 911, he said without peeling his gaze from the figure still motionless behind the tree. I didn't obey. I couldn't turn my eyes away from this door right now to go back inside and retrieve my phone. I needed to see, needed to know what stood there. It happened so fast. It was like a blur of actions taking me by surprise. Jake barely stood a chance as something pierced into his right shoulder. His pain-ridden scream escaped as he clutched the arrow sticking out of his shoulder. "Jake!" I screamed, but cowered with fear to step out. Jake pushed himself from the ground. His eyes met mine as he screamed at me to run. I stared at him for a long second, my brain searching through every single cell for a solution, but paused, contemplating between racing towards Jake, where the blood was now oozing out of his shoulder, his face contorted in pain. I still remained frozen, still trying to decide if I should help my husband or to flee for my life. That decision was made for me. An arrow pierced through his head, tearing through his skull. I gasped an inaudible gasp. My hand flew to my mouth, but it seemed I was incapable of sounds, just as I was incapable of movement. My gaze turned to the figure. It was a man. The man stepped out of the light now, pulling his arrow at me. He released, and I ducked. I slammed the door close and raced for my phone upstairs. I heard the steps racing towards the door. The heavy bang on the door told me he was trying to get in. I reached the bedroom, snatched my phone from the table, and dialed 911. My hands were trembling. Fear had taken a grip of me. When the operator picked up, I explained in shaky voice that there was a man out here to kill me. The cottage was a VIP cottage. The local police were contacted instantly. They would be here soon, 5 minutes tops. I just had to survive till then. I rushed to the room door, turned the lock. I searched everywhere for something to shield me inside. Then I was double-guessing myself again. What if he came from another direction and I had to run? A heavy thud escaped from the living room. He was inside. I could hear boot sounds in the howling night. The wind was screaming behind me. Everything seemed to be watching with bated breath. My options had been limited to 2. Stay here and see who gets in first. The police or him. I reminded myself that the police were 5 minutes away and could not get here on time. His boots were closer now. If he was inside, then maybe I could escape. I reached for the window. Trying my best to be quiet, I climbed off it. The fall to the ground was far. I wouldn't do it on a normal day, but this was not a normal day. My life was on the line. I heard the handle of the door turn, followed by a push. The door didn't budge. I let myself loose and collapsed to the ground with a thud. Picking up again, I darted into the woods, sticking close to the road. I raced as fast as my legs could carry me, running by the edge of the road, my heart almost out of my throat, pumping hard. I heard a car. I raced out onto the road, raising my hands up. The car halted, and a man stepped out. "Are you okay?" he asked. I pointed to the cottage. "There's the man, Something flew past me, piercing the man straight in the face. He fell to the ground without a sound. I jerked to the ground behind the car. Bullets flew in all directions. Another arrow whizzed its way into the car, piercing through the glass. Everything stopped. Cautiously, I stood up. The police were standing over the man's body, his McDonald's uniform still on. I pressed my hand against my mouth, feeling the nausea rushing towards me with a stinging wave. Minutes passed. Walkie-talkies were used to communicate. In a few more minutes, an ambulance arrived. Jake's body was hauled into the same ambulance with the man, while I sat at the back of the cop car, following to the hospital. Outside, it was pitch black, so dark that I could hardly see anything as I stared through the window. I wondered how it would feel to walk alone in the dark, listening for sounds of some horror-like, supernatural manifestation. I chuckled. Of course, I was likely to see none. I left the window and turned back to the screen. There was a movie playing. "It's past my best part," I grumbled before taking the remote to rewind it back. At 25, I was fascinated with the zombies and ghosts, the boogeyman, everything that I had been taught to fear as a kid. Over the years, the fear had worn off, and in its place, this wonder grew. I wondered if any of it was true, the scary stories we were told. Then I toyed with the idea of reaching out to these supernatural entities myself, but my thoughts were merely idle wishes. I watched zombies tear through some survivors' defenses on the TV and rolled my eyes. Too predictable, I thought before I turned to my phone. I had been chatting with someone on Omegle and could not stop wondering what she looked like. Eva, that was her name. It was already late. Still, I initiated a call and waited. Maybe she was not sleeping. Maybe she was feeling as bored as I was and would be happy I had called to save her from that. I waited for a while. Just when I thought there would be no response from the other end, the screen of my phone brightened and someone stared back at me. Her eyes were wide open as she took me in. I did the same, and we did not speak for a while. Okay, she was beautiful. She had a full head of jet black hair, eyebrows that arched over her eyes, and lazy, long eyelashes hanging just over her brown eyes. "You didn't tell me you would call," she said finally. My tongue was still stuck to the roof of my mouth while my mind captured her face. "You know what time it is?" she asked again. She was looking at me curiously now. "Late," I managed to say. "And yet you called." She did not seem angry at all. On the contrary, there was a sly smile forming at the edges of her lips. "You're not mad?" I asked. "No." "So will you come over then?" I asked. We chatted about it, and I knew it was a foolish thing to do, but I had given her my address. The light from the light bulb flickered. "What was that?" she asked. Staring at this bulb instead of her eyes, I replied, "I don't know. I think something shifted." I was back to staring into her eyes again in no time. There was an eagerness in those eyes. "What are you doing? What's that sound?" she asked. "Oh, a movie. A horror movie," I quickly added. We had also chatted about horror movies not being frightening enough and having forced plots. "Is it good?" "Well, I would give it a 5. "Really?" "Yeah, solid 5 out of 10. "Well, that's not so solid. Let me see." I turned the phone's camera toward the TV screen, marveling at how well the both of us were relating, even though we were already chat buddies. It was strange for me seeing her act the exact same way she types. People were hardly like that. "Zombies," she said, laughing. "Come on, it's not." The light flickered again. This time, the TV screen flickered with it. Then the lights went out. In the ensuing darkness, I was stunned with my phone still showing the silhouette of the TV to Eva. The silence that came with the darkness made my beating heart sound like a resounding echo through some unending void. "What just happened?" Eva asked. Her voice startled me. I turned the phone to myself, almost letting it slip out of my hand. She was still there, looking concerned. "I don't know," I said slowly. A sudden static sound from the TV made me jump. When I turned to the screen, it was still dark. The lights were still off. "Are you all right, Nathan?" Eva asked. I nodded, eyes still focused on the direction of the TV. Maybe I was going mad. But was it supposed to happen so quickly? As if in response to my question, I saw it. A twirling smoke-like shadow coming off the TV. I could barely make it out in the dark room. But after I did, I could feel my heart rate begin to slow down. The TV had probably gone bananas and was now smoking. That explained the static sound, I insisted. But what about the light? "Should I call you back later?" Eva asked. No, I stammered, looking into my phone. Thank goodness she was still on Omegle. I wanted to talk with her until I was sleepy. It was difficult admitting it, but I was suddenly scared. I was in an apartment all by myself, and I had never quite felt this vulnerable. "Are you sure?" she asked. My eyes entirely on her face, I nodded. She could make out some features of my face with the light from the phone screen. The static sound came again, and I froze. The smoke was coming off the TV frame once more. This time, another shape followed it. The phone slipped from my hand and crashed to the floor. The shadow moved to the side, and another shadow slipped out from behind the TV frame. I had had enough. Nathan, are you okay? What's going on?" Eva's voice faded into the background as I raced from the room down the hallway. The shadows were in the way of the exit, and there was nothing I could do except to find refuge further inside the apartment. I found the door to another room, pulled it open, and slammed it shut. Immediately I got in, engaging the bolts just as fast. Then I backed myself into the wall at the other end slowly, my eyes never leaving the door. It seemed my apartment was the only one without light. From the vent, 7 feet above and behind me, some illumination filtered in, making the room semi-dark. My back was against the wall, and yet I would not stop pushing. Something slammed into the door from the other side, and I shivered. Whatever it was, I prayed for it not to be able to get in here, as it slammed itself against the door again and again. Then everything became quiet. I listened, my breath stuck in my throat. all thoughts of my video chat on Omegle with Eva. A little movement at the door sent my heart into fluttering beats. The shadows, they were slipping in through the gap between the door and the floor. The shadow was getting bigger, blotting out the little lighting in the room. I shut my eyes, tremors washing through my body. Anybody in here? My eyes sprang open. The light was back. The room was flooded with brightness. The voice was from the hallway. I could hear footsteps. The sound of the police sirens also traveled up to the room from downstairs. I rushed the door, peeping through the cracks. A couple of policemen were walking along the hallway, looking into the other rooms. Eva must have called the police. My eyes watched the hallway cautiously. There was no sign of the shadow. I heaved a sigh of relief and started looking out for some other peaceful and safe place to move in. You know, searching for a new spot takes time. It has been a week since this whole crazy incident, and I cannot wait to vacate this eerie building. The lecturer was taking too long to finish the online class, and while my attention was not there one bit, I could only hope that he was going to end the class soon. My girlfriend and I had been sending texts to each other, and I had this desperate urge to tear her clothes apart after the class. The clock was ticking slowly, very, very slowly. See you all next week. Don't forget to prepare your projects for submission, the lecturer said before logging off. I too logged out and called her. Her voice, it always made my heart skip a beat. Want to come over to my apartment to Netflix and chill later? I asked her. Jonas, you should be studying and preparing your project, which I'm sure you haven't started. We both know this is the last chance you have. You've had to repeat many of your classes about 3 times, she said. I know, but give me a break. Just tonight, and I promise to be focused on books throughout the whole semester, I requested. Fine. I gave her a kiss and ran out after telling her I had to prepare for our date. She was much younger than I was, but I couldn't be happier that I met her because I retook my classes. She was one thing that didn't make me regret failing, though it was crazy to say such. I decorated the room with roses and scented candles which she liked. I checked the time and waited patiently for her to arrive anytime soon since it was already 8, the time she told me she was going to come around. I adjusted my shirt when I heard the knock on the door. I sighed and checked everything to be sure it was perfect before opening the door. You are beautiful. I kissed her hand as soon as she walked in. She blushed and complimented me too before she sat down. I gave her a glass of wine before sitting close to her and turning the TV on. She told me the candles were too much for a Netflix and chill, but I ignored her. Nothing was ever too much. She loved candles and roses, and I was going all out to do it for her and would do more if she wanted me to. I collected the glasses from her and returned them to the kitchen. I was on my way back to mount her when I slipped and hit my head on the floor. I got up and ignored it until I perceived smoke. I turned around and realized it was on my shirt and already burned my hand halfway. I screamed very loud and Lena heard me. She rushed to where I was and froze at the sight. I yelled at her to help me, but she kept looking without moving an inch. I struggled to put it off when another candle caught the other side of my shirt. I screamed very loud, and when she eventually moved, she ran to the chair to pick her bag, and then she was out of the house and left me to myself. I yelled really loud, expecting her to come back when another candle took my trousers. I stopped shouting and accepted my fate. I felt myself being lifted from the ground, but didn't bother opening my eyes, and I couldn't even if I tried to. The beeping sound of a machine became louder every second, and when I opened my eyes, 2 doctors were at my side, recording things down and looking at the machine consistently. Glad you're awake. Your girlfriend brought you in earlier, Jonas. You suffered minor burns only. Thanks to your girl, you arrived on time, the older doctor said. She told us she was going to come back, and we are still waiting for her. Thank you, I told them before they left. I waited for a while, hoping she would be back soon. My phone beeped by my side, and I picked it up, hoping to see a text from her that she was close by, but my hopes were probably too high. I'm sorry, Jonas. This can't work out between the two of us. You choke me sometimes with the way you do things, and I'm a calm person. I can't continue this relationship. Besides, it's really weird to think that you are much older than me, and I can't present that to people. The age gap between us makes things worse. I'm sorry. I like you, but this can't continue. I read the text about 5 times before I was finally able to drop my phone. I didn't know how I was supposed to feel, but it clearly wasn't supposed to be what should be happening at the moment. Whatever. I tried to calm myself while staring out the window. It is what it is.
My laptop was infected with a virus, and while I was trying to solve it, a Zoom call opened up directly in front of me, full of faces that I had never seen before. It looked weird because they all wore the same thing and looked almost alike, the only difference being that some had shorter hair with which they identified as men, while some had longer hair to show that they were women. They all dressed in black shirts and spoke at the same time, and there was a symbol printed out on the right-hand side of each of their shirts. The logo had a snake wrapped around a rough stick with its eyes plugged out like it was looking for something to devour. I tried to leave the call, but I couldn't. I loosened my belt around my trousers to feel better, but my anxiety quickened for each second that I spent more on that video call. I clicked on the leave button on the screen one more time, but it just stuck on it. I decided to be quiet and just listen to whatever it was that they were going to say or whatever was going to happen. One of the guys opened his mouth to talk but closed it back immediately as if he remembered something. And it's just like that, they all wore masks before I even had a chance to take screenshots of their faces. I hit my hand on the table in frustration, and just about that time, the man spoke up. "Well, it's about time you joined us. It's nice to see you after a very long time." I looked back at my sides to be sure that he wasn't talking to me, and it was probably someone who was beside or behind me, even though I lived alone. "I'm sorry, what?" I asked. They saw how confused I was and all laughed. I wondered what was funny and continued to look at them with a confused expression until they stopped laughing. "I see your father didn't tell you a lot of things before he died," one of the women said. Right there, I knew they couldn't be lying because my father was truly dead and he was really secretive about many things which no one got to know before he died. I was guessing the secret group was part of what he didn't talk about before he died, and the other members of the group wanted me to know about it. The only reason they could have hacked into my laptop. I couldn't say anything and just continued to look at them to hear whatever it was they were going to say next. Next, they did something that caused me to run off my chair towards the wall. They brought out big, heavy snakes and wrapped it around their heads before standing up and saying incoherent words. The snakes stood firmly on their heads until they were done and sat back down. I always thought it was important to watch, however, the situation played out in cases like that because you could never tell if what you were going to say is going to agree with them, which meant for me becoming one of them, something I was running from. Any kind of cult was my greatest fear. They began to leave the call one after the other, eventually leaving only me. I tried to leave the call again and I was stuck. I couldn't believe what I just saw. I picked up my phone to call my mom. Even though I didn't know anything about it, it was quite possible that she did.
I waved at my mom as she drove down the street. I wasn't the type who enjoyed staying away from my family so much, especially because I had not seen them for a while because of college. She had a meeting that was going to last about 4 days outside the country, and she had to be there compulsorily. I hoped that she was going to turn around, saying it was canceled or something like that, but I just knew it was almost impossible. No siblings or dad. I had the house to myself for 4 days. The thought of inviting friends crossed my mind, but there was no point to it. Most of the friends I had lived far away, and I could just as well enjoy the feeling of being alone at home. I plugged in my headphones and slept almost instantly, only to wake up 3 hours later with my stomach acting all sorts of drama for me. I walked into the kitchen to get something to eat, but most of the things in the freezer didn't interest me. I ordered from McDonald's, hoping that it was going to satisfy me somehow. "Your order will arrive in 10 minutes. The words were displayed on my phone screen, which made me glad. I could pass 10 minutes by watching a movie or chatting with people. I checked the time continuously, but it was almost like the time was against me and decided to move as slowly as possible. I jumped up as soon as I heard the doorbell go off. I dropped my phone on the bed, rushed to the door, and opened it immediately. Another guy who looked about my age stood with a small smile on his face and a packed nylon from McDonald's in his right hand. He pointed the nylon at me politely. "Here's your order," he said. "Thank you." I collected it from him and tipped him. I closed the door as he turned around to leave, but only to be stopped by a foot between the door and the wall. "What?" I opened the door wide to be sure I wasn't imagining things. The delivery guy stood with a wider smile on his face, the kind that was creepy and cute at the same time. "Can I help you?" I asked. "Is there something you need?" He continued staring without saying a word, the smile still on his face. He pushed the door wide, forcing me to the other side, and walked in like he owned the place. He walked around for a while before eventually turning around to face me. The only thing that bothered me so much at that point was how he was able to maintain the smile all the way. I waited patiently for his next action before deciding on what to do. I probably didn't have to stress so much. He had a smaller stature than I did, and with the number of times I showed up at the gym, I was convinced that I could easily take him down. I asked him over and over again for what he needed, but he kept smiling and walking around, running his fingers over different things in the room before coming to a halt in front of my mom's picture. I could have sworn that I saw a flash of something he was trying so hard to hide deep inside of him. But the question was it the reaction to my mom's picture? He suddenly brought out a gun from nowhere and pointed it at me with a blank face. I couldn't tell what he was thinking anymore, and I could not predict his next move. I raised my hands in surrender, the nylon in my hand flying to another corner of the room. "Where's my mom?" he yelled at my face with so much anger. It was probably the most angry I had seen someone before. I was still thinking of the right words to say when I heard the horn of my mom's car just outside the house. We stared at each other for a while before he hid the gun behind him again. How was it even possible that this person walked around with a gun casually? I sat down quietly with the guy opposite me when my mom walked in, looking frustrated and annoyed. She noticed the tense atmosphere and immediately went into mom mode. She stood far away from the two of us while dialing something on her phone. I low-key prayed it was 911. There was clearly a criminal on the loose. "Jabez?" She stared at the guy and waited for him to respond. Jabez stared at her in shock, balancing the look on my mom's face. I tried to understand whatever was going on between the two of them without asking any questions, hoping to catch some answers on my own. My mom rushed to him and hugged him in tears, shouting words of hallelujah and some other things I couldn't understand. The one thing that stood out in the midst of everything was the fact that Jabez was probably my brother, and he almost killed me. I walked away, leaving the two of them to their reunion, with so many thoughts in my mind. I picked up the McDonald's nylon that fell earlier and walked to my room, closing the door after me. My mom rushed to the door, knocking continuously for me to come out. I ignored her and plugged my headphones back in. I wasn't ready to have that conversation with her. I didn't know if it was me or my ears playing tricks on me, but I heard a loud noise, louder than the music I was playing, and it resonated throughout the house. I heard my mom crying so loud that I had no choice but to rush out. "Left me alone for 20 years, and you think forgiveness is so easy for such? Think again," Jabez said, and walked out of the house. I ran after him, hoping to catch him somehow, but he was faster than me. I managed to get a picture of the plate number. I wasn't even sure if he was really a delivery guy from McDonald's, or if he only used the opportunity to get to my mom. Luckily, he only shot her in the leg, and I dialed 911. I explained everything, and in a few minutes, they were in the house, assuring us and taking my mom straight to the hospital. I told the officers everything I knew and the picture I took earlier with the description of Jabez. They jotted everything down and assured us that everything was going to be fine, which I believed as long as Jabez was caught. 2 days later. "Hello," the voice said on the other side of the line as soon as I picked up the call. "Good afternoon, officer," I replied, my other hand rubbing my mom's palm gently on the hospital bed. "Jabez has been arrested," the officer said. I sighed in relief and thanked the officer before hanging up the call. I turned to my mom, but she was still sleeping. Well, 3 is truly a crowd, even in families, I told myself before adjusting myself into the sleeping position as well. I continued to pull him, stronger and faster each second that passed, until we got back to our room. I kept a straight face until I was sure we were alone in the room before going into an outburst. He had just seen my crush and my roommate tried to make her notice me, something I didn't like. I was shy, and whenever I wanted to do something, I preferred to do it on my own terms without being forced. "Don't do that again," I told him. "I was only trying to help," he said. "Don't help me. I can do things myself." I plugged my earpiece and turned my back to him before lying down on my bed. It was bad enough that I was really shy, but it only got worse when I got matched with a nosy roommate. He always wanted to know everything, which was too much for me as I liked to keep to myself. A very loud knock on the door made me jump up. I didn't know if my roommate was expecting someone, but he didn't move an inch and looked really scared. "What's wrong?" I asked him, but he stared at me speechless. It was the first time I saw him helpless. He looked different, and I wanted to shake him off whatever he was thinking about, but it piqued my interest. I wanted to know who could make him feel like that, and if I could use their help anytime I needed him to be quiet. I opened the door, and an angry, huge student was staring back at me with his fists tightened. I tried to greet him, but he pushed me to the side. He walked in and searched the room frantically for something until his eyes met my roommate's. "Oh boy, we meet again. I've been knocking on different rooms trying to get yours, but I'm glad I have." He walked towards him, and with the posture that he took, I knew whatever was going to happen was not going to end well. I tried to ask what was going on, but neither of them answered me. My roommate, Ken, didn't say anything and didn't move an inch the more the guy moved towards him. "Omegle is not for people like you. You think I wouldn't find out you were the one sending those disturbing things to me and hiding under the name Invisible Judy? A college boy like me has ears and eyes everywhere." I was still trying to understand everything the guy said when I heard a loud thud. Ken was down on the floor with blood in his mouth. He tried to get up again, and the guy punched him harder, making him fall harder the second time. I tried to pull the guy aside, but he was too huge for me, and he only pushed me to the wall with little effort. I contacted the college's security as soon as he walked in and was still expecting them to come around when I heard Ken struggling to breathe. I crawled quickly to Ken's side and tried to keep him awake. The guy looked really disturbed and scared immediately. He was fierce, but seeing what he had done to Ken, he got scared. I scoffed at the sight. He tried to run. When he was met by the securities, they walked in and took as many details as they could before walking the guy out of the room, while some of them attended to Ken and tried to keep him stable. I immediately called the ambulance and hoped that Ken lives to see another day.
My mother always said it was not easy packing up to travel to a place, especially for a large family like ours where we were more than 7, thanks to the never-ending love of my parents. So, as to avoid any late hours rushing or packing under pressure, whereby I forgot to pack some things, I made sure that I started packing 4 days to the day we were traveling, down to greet our grandparents on the south side of the continent. The night before the trip, I thought I was going to sleep early, but it was harder because of how many episodes I had to see. I knew I was not going to have the time in my grandparents' place due to the fact that my mother believed so much in family time that she was going to seize all of our electronic devices for the whole 7 days we were going to be there. I couldn't miss out on Bridgerton. I had to catch up to a point, at least. I checked the time after watching about 10 episodes on Netflix. It was 4 in the morning, and our trip was scheduled for 7, which meant we were going to be leaving the house by 6 in the morning so as to not miss our flight. I switched off my laptop and eventually got some sleep. Joy in my soul that I was going to see my grandparents after about 3 years. The light from the curtain was what woke me up later that morning. I turned in bed and realized there was no mom's voice that was yelling at me to get up from bed, and the house was too quiet. Quiet in the kind of way that forced me to jump up out of bed and go downstairs to check what was going on. The sitting room was dark from all the curtains brought down. I tried to open the door and realized that it was locked. I called my mom and dad and the names of my siblings with no reply. I got scared for a second. They couldn't have forgotten me here, right? I asked no one in particular. I ran back up to my phone to call any of them. They could still be close by. I checked the time and realized it was 10 in the morning. If their flight took off at the time it was supposed to, they would be with my grandparents now, so I tried my luck. All their numbers were switched off and it suddenly clicked. My mom must have collected everything because her number was switched off as well. I tried my grandparents' number, but it said the same thing also. I was old enough to stay home by myself, but not when I was locked in or when I was trapped in a place where I couldn't get out. I confirmed my fear of being trapped in a place right there. I had always told my mom about it, but she thought I was just lying. I went back to bed accepting my fate and continued with Netflix, hoping that I would find something to do in 7 days to get my mind off of it. My parents probably didn't even know I was left behind because they had so many children to watch at once. I was on the second episode of the new season of the series that I had started when I heard the door to our house open. I wanted to yell out loud in case it was any of my family members, but I just decided to run to them instead. I ran out of the room and stopped in my tracks when I noticed the person who was downstairs was not someone I knew at all. She didn't look like any of my family members and looked a little bit older than my mom. I went back into my room and closed the door, making sure I had locked it behind me. I picked up the bat behind the door just to protect myself. "Who's up there?" Her voice was very thick, but one could tell that she was still a woman. "Come out already," she said. I remained as silent as I could and continued to think of what I could do when I heard a knock on the other side of the door. "Come out now." She sounded impatient and like she was ready to push down the door if I didn't come out. I remained behind the door silently and just ignored anything she was saying. She continued to knock the door, harder each time, and she placed her knuckles on the door. "Fine, your parents are going with me then," she said and stopped knocking. I almost laughed out really loud at what she said. How could she possibly have my parents when they were on the other side of the world, probably having barbecue at this moment? I could still tell she was behind the door and was waiting for me to give in to her excuse of my parents being with her to make me come out. I was not even stupid, must have thought she was talking to a child. Her legs hit the ground impatiently, and the moment she knew that I wasn't going to give in, she started hitting the door continuously while shouting in a way that the neighbors couldn't tell that there was an intruder, but also that there was a way that made me frustrated. I ran to my table and picked up the pepper spray. At least I could use that to my advantage. I couldn't stay inside forever, and I had to make sure she didn't take anything from the house either. She had stopped knocking, and even though I could see her legs from the space between the door and the floor, I still decided to go out. Whatever would happen would surely do. I placed the pepper spray in my hand, while the bat remained in my other hand after I opened the door a little. She pushed the door wide open, and before I could get a chance to do anything, I sprayed pepper spray in her face without giving her any chance to redeem herself. I continued spraying before running down to pick up the house phone to call 911. I felt a force grab me from behind with all the frustration I could feel coming off the person. I knew it was the woman. She was strangely stronger than I had imagined, and her energy surpassed mine. I argued with her and tried to loosen myself from her grip, but she kept holding me back and hit me violently. I had dropped the pepper spray when I was trying to dial the number, and while I was left with only the bat in my hand, I wasted no time and hit her directly on the head. She yelled at me and pulled me back by the neck while trying to pull the bat from me. I hit her again and she fell to the floor, helpless. I couldn't tell if she was dead or not because her chest moved up and down in a pattern that wasn't rhythmic. I dialed 911, and after explaining everything, I picked up the pepper spray and placed it in my hand for if she woke up again while waiting for the help to arrive.
Everyone wanted the latest iPhone, no matter the size or the features. As long as it had an iPhone logo in it, it was perfect. Now, as much as some people were against it because many other people believed it is addictive, others believed they were just like that because they didn't have the money to afford it. I hit my leg on the table, yelling and screaming at my mom for not getting me what I'd been begging her for, the latest iPhone. Without it, no one was really called a human being, and it was the only requirement for being a human that society could accept as one of them. She ignored me and watched as I looked terrible as I made myself to, and only continued to cook the dinner she was using all her strength that was left to make. I hit the table over and over again, and when she turned at me immediately with her eyes as red as the devil's eye in books, I stopped. For God's sake, Leisha, you're 20 years old now, and you should have a job at least, even if you're not in college. Get a job, earn money, and buy the phone yourself, because I wouldn't buy it for you, understood? She said, and turned back to what she was cooking. I stood up angrily and just left her there. You're just selfish, I said below my breath. I almost sat down on the bed when I noticed a piece of paper stuck to the window in my room. I tried to read it from afar, but the font was too small. I picked up the paper, and the only thing that could make me happy was written boldly on it. You really want an iPhone? Your house entrance, 10 o'clock at night. I jumped for joy when I read it, and began prepare for the meeting with whoever dropped the note on my window. I checked the time, and it was 2 hours to 10, which meant I could sleep for an hour or more before going out, and it was quite easy for me because I knew my mom was already going to be asleep by 9. I laid down quietly till sleep took over me. When I woke up, it was already 30 minutes past 9. I jumped up from bed, took a quick shower before wearing an oversized jogger with a crop top. I plugged in my earpiece before walking out of the house. At the entrance, just in front of my leg, there was a package that had my name written on it. I knew it was what I was expecting, and just as I bent down to pick it up, a black bag covered my head, and I struggled to be free from the grip of whoever was holding me. Stop! The person didn't listen and only continued to tie up my arms. Mom! I was not really hopeful that she was going to hear me because she probably had her ears plugged, something I love doing in my free time as well. I stopped struggling when the person tied my legs together, and just before I could say anything or plead with him or her, the person lifted me off the ground, and after a few seconds, I yelled from the pain I felt when he dumped me in a place that felt like the back of a truck. You gullible thing. You wanted an iPhone? You're sure gonna get one. A thick voice said, which sent chills down my bones. I kept quiet after that, and got ready for whatever was coming for me.